a golden egg floating in infinite darkness. Inside it, a god who has been sleeping for billions of years. And the moment he opens his eyes, the entire universe explodes into existence. Every star, every ocean, every living thing, born from one breath. But here's what no one tells you about Hindu creation. This has already happened, billions of times before. Because in Hindu mythology, the universe isn't created once. It's destroyed and reborn in an endless cycle. And we are living inside one of those cycles, right now. This is the story of how everything began, according to the oldest religion on earth. Before the stars, before the earth, before light itself, there was nothing. Not darkness, not silence, not emptiness, nothing. A state so absolute that no human word would ever truly capture it. The ancient Sanskrit texts would call it neti neti, not this, not that. It was beyond existence and beyond non-existence, a paradox resting inside itself. But within this nothing, something stirred. An ocean, not of water, of pure, infinite consciousness. The Hindus would call it the Kshira Sagara, the ocean of milk, a cosmic sea that stretched beyond all boundaries, beyond space, beyond time, beyond anything the human mind could hold. And floating upon this ocean, resting on the coils of an enormous serpent, was a god. His name was Vishnu. He would lie there, eyes closed, perfectly still, as if the very concept of motion had not yet been invented. The serpent beneath him, Shesha, the Endless One, would coil 1,000 times, each loop large enough to cradle a galaxy. And upon the serpent's many heads, a canopy of cobra hoods would spread like an umbrella over the sleeping god, shielding him from the nothingness outside. This was not sleep as humans know it. This was cosmic rest, a pause between worlds. Because Vishnu had done this before. He had created universes, watched them burn, and dissolved them back into himself. Billions of times. Each time he would rest, and each time he would begin again. But now something was different. From Vishnu's navel, a golden lotus would begin to grow. Slowly at first, a stem rising through the emptiness like a single thought breaking through silence. The lotus would climb and climb, stretching upward through the void until it broke through the surface of the cosmic ocean and bloomed. And sitting inside that lotus, confused, alone, and utterly unaware of who he was, sat Brahma, the creator. He would open his eyes, 4 of them, one in each direction, and see nothing. Just the lotus beneath him and the infinite darkness beyond. No instructions, no map, no memory, just a god, sitting in a flower with no idea why he existed. But Brahma would not panic. Instead, he would do something extraordinary. He would close all 4 eyes and meditate. For years, for centuries, for a span of time so vast that human calendars would collapse trying to measure it. And in that meditation, knowledge would begin to pour into him, not from the outside, but from within, as if the blueprint of the universe had been hidden inside him all along, waiting to be remembered. And when he finally opened his eyes again, Brahma would know exactly what to do. He would speak. And from his words, the universe would explode into existence. The first sound, Om, would ripple outward in every direction, creating space where there had been none. Light would split from darkness. Hot would separate from cold. Up would divorce from down. The elements would tear themselves apart: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And reassemble into something that had never existed before. A world, but not just one world. Hindu cosmology would not settle for a single planet orbiting a single star. Brahma would create 14 realms, stacked on top of each other like floors of an unimaginable building, 7 above, 7 below. Earth, Bhuloka, would sit in the middle, the only realm where humans could be born, live, die, and be reborn. Above the earth, the heavens. Svargaloka, where the gods would feast and dance among gardens of wish-fulfilling trees, where rivers flowed with nectar and the air itself tasted of honey. Here, the Apsaras, celestial maidens of impossible beauty, would perform dances so enchanting that a single performance could last 1,000 years and not one god in the audience would blink. Gandharvas, the celestial musicians, would play melodies that could make mountains weep and rivers change their course. Higher still, Mahaloka, where the great sages would sit in meditation so deep that their bodies would glow like living suns. These were beings who had conquered desire, conquered fear, conquered death itself. And yet, they chose to remain, watching over creation like silent guardians. And at the very top, Satyaloka, Brahma's own realm, the plane of absolute truth, where time itself would move differently. A single day in Satyaloka would equal 4.32 billion human years. A conversation between two beings in Satyaloka might outlast the rise and fall of every civilization that would ever exist on Earth. Below the Earth, the underworlds, not hells, not yet. These were realms of astonishing beauty and deep shadow, of serpent kings and hidden treasures. Atala, where a great demon named Bala would rule, his yawn producing 3 types of women so beautiful that any man who saw them would fall into a trance. Vitala, where Lord Shiva himself would wander in the form of Hatakeshvara, surrounded by ghosts and goblins, his laughter echoing through caverns of gold. Sutala, the most magnificent of all the underworlds, a realm more beautiful than heaven itself, ruled by Mahabali, the demon king who had been pushed there by Vishnu's dwarf avatar. Even in exile, Mahabali's generosity and virtue would make his realm shine brighter than Indra's palace above. And at the very bottom, Patala, where the Nagas, divine serpents with jeweled hoods, would guard treasures beyond human imagination. Their king, Vasuki, would coil around mountains of diamonds, his 1,000 heads lit by gemstones embedded in each hood, casting a light so brilliant that Patala knew neither darkness nor the need for a sun. Between these worlds, the cosmos itself would pulse with unseen connections. Rivers of energy would flow between realms. Souls would migrate up and down the cosmic ladder based on their karma. And bridges, invisible to mortal eyes but as real as stone to those who could see them, would connect heaven to earth, earth to the underworld, the living to the dead. But Brahma's creation was not finished. A universe without inhabitants would be nothing more than an empty stage, a theater with no actors, a song with no singer. And so from different parts of his own body, Brahma would begin to produce life. From his mind, the first sages, the Manasaputras, beings of pure thought who would carry divine knowledge into the world. From his body, the first humans, born in pairs, male and female, sent to populate the earth. From his emotions, the demons, the asuras, born from his hip in a moment of darkness. And from his breath, the animals, the birds, the fish, the insects, every crawling and flying thing that would fill the forests and the seas. But first, Brahma would create from his mind, not ordinary men, but extraordinary ones. The Manasaputras, the mind-born sons, would be the first great sages. Marichi, Atri, Angiras, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Brigu, Vasishtha, Daksha, and Narada. 10 beings of pure intellect, born fully formed from Brahma's concentrated thought, each one carrying a fragment of cosmic wisdom that no school could teach and no lifetime could accumulate. Brahma would ask them to populate the creation he had made. "Go forth," he would say. "Create families, build civilizations, fill the worlds I've built now." But the Manasaputras would refuse. "We will not bind ourselves to physical creation," they would say. "We have seen what desire creates, attachment, suffering, rebirth. We choose the path of renunciation." And so the first act of Brahma's created beings would be to reject their creator's plan. Brahma would be furious. It was the first conflict in the history of creation, not between gods and demons, but between a maker and his own creations, between the compulsion to build and the wisdom to understand that all building led inevitably to decay. He would curse the Manasaputras to be born again and again in physical bodies until they understood the necessity of material existence. But the Manasaputras would not be entirely wrong. Narada, the wandering sage, the cosmic gossip, the divine troublemaker who carried news between worlds on his Veena, would become one of the most important figures in Hindu mythology, precisely because of his untethered, unattached nature. He would appear in story after story, planting seeds of conflict here, dropping hints of uncomfortable truth there, never staying in one place long enough to be caught by the consequences of his words. He was the universe's journalist, its conscience, the one who asked the questions no one else dared to speak. Daksha, another of the Manasaputras, would take the opposite path. He would become the greatest progenitor in all of creation, the father of countless daughters whom he would give in marriage to gods and sages and cosmic beings. His descendants would populate every realm. His family tree would become the genealogical root of much of Hindu mythology. But his pride would become the seed of one of the most devastating tragedies in the history of the divine world. And so, from the very first moments of creation, the pattern was established. Even the most divinely conceived beings would make choices, and choices would have consequences, and consequences would ripple outward across vast stretches of time, touching events centuries and millennia distant, like stones dropped into the cosmic ocean, sending waves to shores that no one standing at the center could ever see. The cosmos Brahma had created was not a perfect machine running on predictable laws. It was a story, alive, unpredictable, populated by beings who had free will and used it in ways that no creator could fully anticipate. This was the beauty and the terror of it. Brahma had not made a perfect world. He had made a real one. Because a perfect world would have no conflict, and a world without conflict would have no growth. And a world without growth would have no souls, only objects. And Brahma, whether he understood it in that first moment of creation or not, had given his universe something far more valuable than order. He had given it the capacity to surprise even its creator. But creation also required knowledge. A universe without wisdom was chaos. And so, from Brahma himself, the goddess Saraswati would emerge, born of his own being, radiant and serene, clothed in pure white, seated on a lotus, holding a veena whose strings could produce the music of the spheres. Saraswati was the goddess of knowledge, language, music, and the arts. Every word ever spoken, every song ever composed, every equation ever solved, all of it flowed from her. She would give humanity speech, the ability to name things, to describe them, to understand them, and without speech, thought itself would be impossible. Saraswati was not merely the goddess of learning. She was the reason learning existed. And through her, Through the vibration of divine sound, Brahma would receive the four Vedas, not invent them, not compose them, receive them. Because the Hindus believed that the Vedas were not created by any being, divine or human. They were eternal, sounds that had always existed in the fabric of reality, sounds that Brahma heard during his meditation and passed on to the sages. The Rig Veda, the oldest text on earth, containing hymns so ancient that scholars still argue about when they were first spoken. The Sama Veda, the Veda of music, whose chants were so precisely calibrated that singing them correctly could alter reality. The Yajur Veda, the Veda of ritual, the instruction manual for maintaining cosmic order, and the Atharva Veda, the Veda of everyday life, containing prayers for healing, love, protection, and the mysteries of the human heart. These four books would become the foundation of an entire civilization. A civilization that would produce philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and art of a quality and sophistication that would still astonish scholars 5,000 years later. The civilization of the Indus Valley, one of the oldest on Earth, built cities with indoor plumbing before Rome existed, calculated the value of pi to extraordinary precision before Greece, described the heliocentric solar system before Copernicus, mapped the distance from the Earth to the Sun with remarkable accuracy, using nothing but mathematics and meditation. All of this, the Hindus would say, flowed from the Vedas, and the Vedas flowed from the moment Brahma opened his eyes in the lotus and heard the universe speaking. But here is what made Hindu creation different from every other mythology on earth. Brahma did not simply make the world and walk away. He set a clock, a cosmic clock with an expiration date built into the fabric of reality itself. The universe, according to Hindu scripture, would exist for exactly 1 day of Brahma. And 1 day of Brahma, called a kalpa, would last 4.2 billion years. During this day, civilizations would rise and fall, gods would be born and die, entire species would evolve, flourish, and vanish without a trace. And when the day ended, when Brahma closed his eyes to sleep, the entire universe would dissolve. Every star, every mountain, every ocean, every living soul would be reabsorbed into the cosmic ocean, waiting for Brahma to wake again. But here was the staggering part. 1 day of Brahma was not the end. It was barely the beginning. Brahma himself would live for 100 Brahma years, a number so large that writing it out would fill pages. And when Brahma's life ended, even he would dissolve, and from Vishnu's navel a new lotus would grow, and a new Brahma would be born, and the entire cycle would start again. This was the Hindu answer to the question every civilization has asked. How did it all begin? It didn't. It never began, and it would never end. The universe was not a story with a first page. It was a wheel, always turning, always returning. And we, all of us, were somewhere on that wheel right now. But creation was only the first act, because the universe Brahma had built was not meant to run peacefully. It was designed, from its very first breath, for conflict. To understand Hindu mythology, you must first understand its 3 most powerful gods, not because they are characters in a story, but because they are the story. Every war, every love, every betrayal, every miracle in Hindu mythology flows from the relationship between 3 beings who are, in truth, 3 faces of the same infinite reality. They would be called the Trimurti, the triple form, Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer. Together, they would form the engine of the universe, a machine designed to create, sustain, and annihilate reality in an eternal loop. But despite their shared divinity, these three gods could not have been more different. Brahma, the one who had awakened in the lotus, would be the most paradoxical god in all of Hindu mythology. He had created everything, every atom, every thought, every soul that had ever existed was his work. And yet almost no one would worship him. In all of India, a land of over 1 million temples, fewer than a handful would be dedicated to Brahma, the creator of the universe, nearly forgotten by his own creation. Why? The stories would offer different answers. One tale would say that Brahma had lied, that he had once claimed to have found the top of an infinite pillar of light, when in truth he had not. Shiva, who had created that pillar as a test, would curse him. "You spoke falsely, and so no one shall worship you for all of time." Another story would say that Brahma had looked upon his own daughter, Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, whom he had created from his own body, with desire. The other gods, disgusted, would turn away from him, and humanity would follow. But perhaps the deepest answer was this: creation in Hindu thought was not the highest act. Creating the world was necessary, but it was messy, imperfect, full of suffering. The truly divine act was not creation, it was preservation, and that was Vishnu's domain. Vishnu would be the most beloved god in Hinduism. Where Brahma created and Shiva destroyed, Vishnu would hold everything together. He was the balance, the steady hand, the god who would descend to earth again and again in different forms whenever the world teetered on the edge of chaos. These descents would be called avatars, a word the entire world would eventually adopt, though most people who used it would have no idea of its sacred origin. Vishnu would be depicted with 4 arms, each holding a symbol of his power: a conch shell whose sound would scatter demons, a discus, sharp enough to cut through any evil, a lotus representing purity, and a mace for the enemies that words could not reach. His skin would be blue, not the blue of the sky, but the blue of infinity itself, as if the cosmos had been compressed into the form of a man. He would rest on the cosmic serpent Shesha between incarnations, and beside him always would be his consort Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, beauty, and abundance. Where Vishnu went, prosperity followed. But if Vishnu was the steady heartbeat of the universe, Shiva was its wild, untamed breath. Shiva would be the most complex god in all of world mythology. He was the destroyer, but he was also the greatest lover. He was the supreme ascetic who could meditate for millennia without moving. But he was also the cosmic dancer whose movements created and annihilated worlds. He was terrifying and gentle, wrathful and compassionate, naked and adorned, celibate and passionate. He would live on Mount Kailash, the most sacred peak in the Himalayas, a mountain so holy that no human would ever be permitted to climb it. There, surrounded by snow and silence, Shiva would sit in meditation, his body smeared with ash from funeral pyres, his hair matted and wild, a cobra draped around his neck like a garland. His throat would be blue, stained forever by a poison so lethal that it would have destroyed the universe had Shiva not drunk it himself. This act, swallowing the world's poison to save all of creation, would earn him the name Nilakantha, the blue-throated one. And it would reveal the paradox at the heart of his nature. The destroyer was, in his deepest truth, the greatest protector of all. Around his neck, a garland of skulls, not trophies of conquest, but reminders of impermanence. Each skull represented a universe that had existed before this one. Each skull was a cosmos that had been born, had flourished, and had died. Shiva wore the death of worlds like jewelry because he alone understood that death was not an ending. It was the breath between words, the silence between notes, the necessary pause before the next creation. On his forehead, a third eye, the most dangerous weapon in all of Hindu mythology. Two eyes saw the physical world, the third saw truth, and truth, unfiltered, was lethal. When that eye opened, whatever it gazed upon would be reduced to ash, not as punishment, but as revelation. The fire of the third eye did not destroy things. It revealed them to be what they always were: temporary, illusory, already ash, just waiting to remember. It had happened before. To Kamadeva, the god of love, who had dared to disturb Shiva's meditation. It would happen again. To the three cities of the Asuras, Tripura, which had grown so powerful that they threatened to eclipse heaven itself, Shiva would open his third eye, and three floating cities of gold, silver, and iron would vanish in a single flash of white fire. But Shiva's most famous attribute was his dance. The Tandava, a dance so powerful that when Shiva performed it, the universe itself would tremble. In its gentle form, the dance would create. In its violent form, the Rudra Tandava, it would annihilate everything. Stars, planets, time, space, all of it reduced to nothing by the rhythm of Shiva's feet. And this was the secret of the Trimurti. Brahma would create the world. Vishnu would maintain it. And when it grew old, corrupt, and irredeemable, Shiva would dance. And in the ashes of his dance, Brahma would build again. But the Trimurti were not alone. Around them orbited a vast pantheon of gods, goddesses, demons, sages, and celestial beings, each with their own stories, their own loves, their own tragedies. The Devas, gods of light, led by Indra, the king of heaven, who rode a white elephant and wielded a thunderbolt. The Asuras, gods of darkness, not evil by nature but driven by ambition, jealousy, and an insatiable hunger for power. The Apsaras, celestial dancers so beautiful that sages who had meditated for centuries would lose their concentration at a single glance. The Yakshas, nature spirits who guarded the earth's treasures, creatures of the forests and rivers who could be generous or terrifying depending on whether you showed respect for their domain. Their king, Kubera, was the wealthiest being in the universe, the god of riches, whose flying palace, Pushpaka Vimana, could carry an entire army through the sky. And the rishis, the great sages, men who had accumulated so much spiritual power through meditation and penance that even the gods would fear their curses. A rishi's curse, once spoken, could not be undone. Not by Vishnu, not by Shiva, not by anyone. Consider the sage Durvasa, whose temper was so legendary that his name literally meant difficult to live with. A single insult could provoke him to curse an entire dynasty into ruin. Or Vishwamitra, a king who renounced his throne and meditated for thousands of years to earn the title of Brahmarishi, the highest class of sage, a pursuit so intense that it would generate enough heat to alarm the gods themselves. Or Narada, the wandering sage who carried a veena and traveled between worlds, delivering news, stirring trouble, and occasionally setting events into motion that would reshape the cosmos. These sages existed outside the hierarchy of gods and demons. They answered to no one. They could create new worlds, alter the flow of rivers, or reduce a god to a mortal with a single word. The most powerful beings in Hindu mythology were not the gods with their weapons and palaces. They were the quiet men sitting cross-legged in forest clearings, their eyes closed, their minds touching infinity. This was the stage. These were the players. a universe of 14 realms, populated by gods and demons, serpents and sages, celestial dancers and divine musicians. A cosmos running on a clock that counted down in billions of years, a stage where creation and destruction were not opposites, but partners. Two dancers in an eternal embrace. But before the great dramas could unfold, the cosmos needed one more element, a bridge between the divine and the human. That bridge would take the form of a river. The Ganges, was not merely a river. She was a goddess. And her descent from heaven to earth would be one of the most spectacular events in all of Hindu mythology. It would begin with a king named Sagara, whose 60,000 sons had been burned to ash by the angry glance of a sage. Their souls, trapped between worlds, could only be liberated if the waters of the celestial Ganga, which flowed through heaven, could wash over their ashes on earth. But how do you bring a river from heaven to earth? The force of the Ganga falling from the sky would be enough to shatter the planet. The water would crash through the earth, through the underworld, and out the other side, destroying everything. Only one being could absorb that impact: Shiva. King Bhagirath, Sagara's descendant, would perform penance for 1,000 years, begging Ganga to descend and begging Shiva to catch her. Both would finally agree. And so the Ganga would fall from heaven. A column of divine water, vast enough to fill oceans, plummeting toward the earth at impossible speed. The gods would gather to watch. The sky itself would tremble. And Shiva would stand beneath it. He would tilt his head upward, and the entire river, the full force of a celestial ocean, would crash into his matted hair. His locks would spread like a net, absorbing the impact, breaking the single devastating torrent into 1,000 gentle streams. The Ganga would flow from Shiva's hair to the earth in 7 tributaries, each one winding through the mountains and plains of India. She would wash over the ashes of Sagara's 60,000 sons, liberating their souls at last. Still today, the Ganges would be the holiest river on earth. Millions of Hindus would bathe in her waters, believing that she could wash away sins accumulated across lifetimes. The dying would be brought to her banks so that their last breath could mix with her current. And the ashes of the dead would be scattered in her flow, continuing a tradition that stretched back to the moment Shiva caught a falling goddess in his hair. And the drama was about to begin. Because somewhere in the depths of the cosmos, a conflict was brewing, one that would pit God against demon, brother against brother, and shake the foundations of heaven itself. There is a story in Hindu mythology that contains, in a single episode, everything you need to understand about the Hindu universe. It has gods, demons, treachery, poison, immortality, and a moment where the entire cosmos nearly ended. Not through war, but through cooperation gone wrong. It would be called the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of milk. And it would begin, as so many catastrophes do, with a curse. Indra, the king of the gods, was riding his great white elephant through the heavens when he encountered a sage named Durvasa. Now, Durvasa was no ordinary sage. He was known across all 3 worlds for one thing above all else: his temper. His anger was legendary, volcanic, irrational, and utterly devastating. Even the gods would tread carefully around him. Durvasa, in an uncharacteristic moment of generosity, would offer Indra a sacred garland, a wreath of flowers imbued with divine energy. It was a gift of immense spiritual value. But Indra, drunk on his own power, would take the garland and carelessly place it on the trunk of his elephant. The elephant, finding it annoying, would toss it to the ground, and trample it. Durvasa would watch this happen, and his face would darken. "You arrogant fool," the sage would whisper. "You have treated a sacred offering like garbage, and so I curse you and all the gods. From this moment forward, your strength will drain. Your kingdoms will crumble. Your immortality will fade." And with those words, the curse would take hold. The gods would begin to weaken. Their weapons would lose their edge. Their palaces would crack. Their enemies, the asuras, the demons, would sense this weakness immediately. Like sharks smelling blood in water, they would attack. War after war, battle after battle, the demons would push the gods back until Indra's heavenly kingdom was on the verge of collapse. Desperate, the gods would turn to Vishnu. Vishnu, resting on his cosmic serpent, would open his eyes and listen to their pleas. And then he would smile, because he already knew the solution. But the gods would not like it. "There is only one way to restore your power," Vishnu would say. "You must obtain the Amrita, the nectar of immortality. It lies at the bottom of the ocean of milk. But to extract it, you must churn to the ocean itself. And you cannot do this alone. You must ask the demons to help you." The gods would be horrified. Work with the asuras, the very beings who were trying to destroy them, it was unthinkable. But Vishnu would explain the plan. Promise the demons a share of the nectar. Use their strength to churn the ocean. And when the nectar appears, take it all. It was, in essence, a divine con job. And so the greatest engineering project in cosmic history would begin. For a churning rod, they would uproot Mount Mandara, an entire mountain torn from the earth and placed upside down in the center of the ocean. For a churning rope, they would use Vasuki, the king of serpents, a snake so long that his body could wrap around the mountain multiple times. The gods would take one end, the demons would take the other, and together they would pull back and forth for centuries. The ocean would begin to froth and boil. Waves the size of continents would crash against the shores of reality. The mountain would spin so fast that forests on its slopes would catch fire, and the animals living there would be incinerated. Rivers of lava would pour from the peak. But something was wrong. The mountain had no base. It was sinking into the ocean floor, threatening to plunge into the underworld and end the entire operation. This was when Vishnu would intervene for the first time. He would take the form of a giant tortoise, Kurma, his second avatar, and dive to the bottom of the ocean. The mountain would settle onto his shell, and the churning would continue. And then things would begin to emerge from the ocean. First, Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling cow, a divine creature that could grant any desire. The gods would claim her. Then Airavata, the great white elephant, who would become Indra's mount. Then the Apsaras, celestial maidens of impossible beauty, who would become the dancers of heaven. Then Kalpavriksha, the wish-fulfilling tree whose branches could produce anything that was asked of it. This tree would be planted in Indra's garden, where it would bloom for eternity, its fruit granting any desire. Then Chandra, the moon itself, rising pale and luminous from the waters. Shiva would claim the moon, placing it in his matted hair, where it would shine like a jewel against the darkness of his locks. Still today, Shiva would be depicted with the crescent moon in his hair, a trophy from the churning. Then Dhanvantari, a form of Vishnu carrying the secrets of Ayurveda, the science of life. The ancient system of medicine that would spread across Asia and still be practiced today by millions. The knowledge of healing, born from the same churning that would produce the nectar of immortality. Then the divine white horse Uchhaishravas, blazing with supernatural speed, his coat white as moonlight, his mane streaming behind him like a comet's tail. Both the gods and the demons would want him. For the gods, he represented divine authority. For the demons, the conquest of the heavens. Vishnu would give the horse to Indra, who would ride him into the next age of the world. The demons would seethe, another treasure claimed by the enemy. Then the Kaustubha gem, a jewel of such radiance that it outshone every star in every sky. Clear as deep water but burning with an internal fire that never dimmed, it held within it the accumulated light of 1,000,000 suns, compressed into something small enough to hold in a palm. No craftsman had made it. No mine had produced it. It had existed inside the ocean since before time, waiting to be found. Vishnu would claim it and wear it on his chest for all eternity, the most precious object in the universe resting close to the heart of its preserver, a reminder that beauty itself was among the things worth protecting. Then Parijata, the divine flowering tree, its blossoms never wilting, its fragrance carrying across entire worlds and through walls and over mountains. Indra would take it to his garden in heaven, where it would bloom forever, its flowers able to grant any wish to anyone who inhaled their scent. This tree would later become the object of a quarrel between Krishna and his wife, Satyabhama. A dispute that would prove, among other things, that even the households of gods were not immune to jealousy over beautiful things. Then Lakshmi herself, the goddess of fortune, rising from the foam on a lotus flower. The moment she appeared, the entire cosmos would hold its breath. She was not merely beautiful, she was the embodiment of everything desirable. Wealth, prosperity, fertility, grace, charm, and splendor, all compressed into a single divine form. Elephants would shower her with sacred water, sages would chant hymns, every god and every demon would reach toward her, desperate to claim her as his own. But Lakshmi would look upon all of them, the mighty Indra, the cunning demons, the powerful sages, and she would choose the one who had not reached for her. The one who lay quietly on his serpent, eyes half closed, a faint smile on his blue lips. Vishnu. She would place a garland around his neck, and from that moment she would be his consort for all eternity. Where Vishnu went, Lakshmi followed. Where Vishnu incarnated, Lakshmi incarnated beside him, as Sita beside Rama, as Rukmini beside Krishna. The divine couple, inseparable across all time and all incarnations. But the ocean was not done. Because the next thing to emerge was not a treasure. It was a catastrophe. A cloud of purple-black poison would rise from the churning waters, Halahala, the venom of the universe. It would spread across the sky like a living thing, killing everything it touched. Birds would fall dead from the air. Fish would float belly up on the surface. The gods and demons, choking, would stagger backward. The poison was so potent that if it reached the ocean floor, it would destroy all of creation. There was no antidote, no weapon that could stop it, no god powerful enough to contain it, except one. Shiva would step forward. Without hesitation, without ceremony, without even asking for permission, he would cup the poison in his hands and drink it. All of it. Every last drop of the venom that would have ended the universe. His wife, Parvati, watching in horror, would grab his throat, pressing hard enough to prevent the poison from reaching his stomach, where it would have killed even him. The poison would settle in his throat, turning it permanently blue, and the churning would continue. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a figure would rise from the ocean. Dhanvantari, the divine physician, holding a golden pot that glowed with an inner light, the Amrita, the nectar of immortality. The moment it appeared, the demons would lunge for it. Centuries of cooperation would evaporate in a heartbeat. Every demon in that ocean would charge toward the pot, shoving gods out of the way, clawing at each other, desperate to drink first. And this was exactly what Vishnu had anticipated. He would transform, not into a warrior, not into a beast, but into Mohini, the most beautiful woman the universe had ever seen. She would appear among the chaos, and every demon would freeze. Their aggression would melt into infatuation. They would forget the nectar, forget the war, forget everything except the woman standing before them. "Let me distribute the nectar fairly," Mohini would say, her voice like honey. "Sit in two lines, gods on one side, demons on the other. I will serve each of you in turn." The demons, hypnotized, would agree, and Mohini would begin serving, starting with the gods. Cup after cup, she would pour the Amrita into divine mouths, walking slowly down the line of gods, taking her time. By the time the demons realized they were being tricked, by the time the last of them lunged forward in rage, the nectar was gone. Every drop consumed by the gods, but one demon had been cleverer than the rest. Rahu, a cunning asura, had disguised himself as a god and slipped into the divine line. He had managed to swallow a single sip of the nectar before the sun and the moon spotted him and alerted Vishnu. Vishnu would spin around and hurl his discus, the Sudarshana chakra, and it would slice through Rahu's neck with a sound like thunder. But the nectar had already touched his throat. Rahu's head, immortal, undying, would survive, separated forever from his mortal body. And from that day forward, Rahu's severed head would chase the sun and the moon across the sky, trying to swallow them in revenge. And when he caught them, for just a moment, the world would go dark. This was the Hindu explanation for eclipses. And still, today, in parts of India, people would bang drums and shout during eclipses, trying to scare Rahu into releasing the sun. The churning of the ocean would end with the gods restored to power and the demons defeated, but not destroyed. Because in Hindu mythology, evil was never truly eliminated. It was pushed back, contained, delayed. The wheel would turn and the demons would rise again. But for now, the gods had won, and the universe would enter its next chapter, one that would be defined not by the gods in heaven, but by a single god's decision to walk the earth as a mortal man. Of all the ideas in Hindu mythology, none would travel further across the world than this one, the idea that God does not simply watch from above. He comes down. Whenever the world tilts too far toward darkness, whenever evil grows too strong, too bold, too close to swallowing everything, Vishnu would descend. He would take a form, a body, a life. He would be born as a fish, a tortoise, a boar, a half-lion, a dwarf, a warrior, a prince, a cowherd, a teacher. 10 times in total, 10 avatars, each one arriving at the exact moment the universe needed saving. The word avatar would eventually find its way into every language on Earth. James Cameron would use it for his highest-grossing film. Video game developers would use it to describe digital alter egos. But its original meaning was precise and sacred: descent. A god choosing to fall, to leave the infinite and enter the finite, not for his own sake, but for the sake of a world that could not save itself. This was the story of Vishnu's 10 descents, and it was, in many ways, the spine of Hindu mythology itself. The first descent would happen at the end of an age when the world was about to be destroyed by a great flood. A story that would echo across civilizations, from the Bible to the Epic of Gilgamesh, as if some ancient memory of drowning lived in the bones of every culture. A king named Manu The Hindu equivalent of Noah would be washing his hands in a river when a tiny fish would swim into his palms. "Protect me," the fish would say, "and I will protect you." Manu, startled but compassionate, would place the fish in a jar. But by the next morning, the fish would have outgrown the jar. He would move it to a pond. By the next day, it would fill the pond. He would move it to a lake, then the ocean. And still the fish would grow, until it stretched across the horizon, massive beyond comprehension, its golden scales catching light from stars that hadn't been born yet. And then the fish would speak again. "I am Vishnu. A flood is coming, one that will swallow the entire world. Build a boat. Fill it with the seeds of every living thing. And when the waters rise, tie your boat to my horn." Because the fish, this impossible universe-sized fish, had a single horn on its head. And when the rains came, when the oceans rose, when every mountain was swallowed and every land vanished beneath the waves, Manu would tie his boat to that horn. And Matsya, Vishnu in his first form, would pull the boat through the storm, through the chaos, through the end of the world itself. And when the waters receded, Manu would step on to dry land, the sole survivor, the father of a new humanity. You have already heard this story. When Mount Mandara was sinking during the churning of the ocean, Vishnu would dive beneath the waves and become a tortoise, a shell so vast that an entire mountain could rest upon it. But there was a deeper meaning here that the surface story would not reveal. The tortoise withdraws into its shell, pulling its limbs, its head, its entire being inward. This was Vishnu teaching the universe a lesson about strength. Sometimes true power was not in action, but in support. In being the foundation that holds everything else up. The demon Hiranyaksha, whose name meant golden eye, would grow so powerful that he would steal the earth itself. He would drag the entire planet to the bottom of the cosmic ocean and sit upon it like a throne, laughing at the gods who dared not challenge him. Vishnu would descend as Varaha, a colossal boar bristling with cosmic energy, eyes blazing like twin suns. He would plunge into the ocean, his tusks carving through the water, and find Hiranyaksha at the bottom, waiting. The battle would last 1,000 years. The ocean would boil. Tidal waves would crash against the shores of heaven. But Varaha, patient, relentless, unstoppable, would finally gore the demon with his tusks. And then, gently, tenderly, he would lift the earth out of the water on those same tusks and place her back in her orbit. The image, a massive boar cradling the earth on its tusks, would become one of the most iconic in all of Hindu art. Power and gentleness, destruction and rescue. Always both, always together. This would be the most terrifying of Vishnu's forms, and it would begin with a prayer. Hiranyaksha had a brother, Hiranyakashipu. When Hiranyaksha was killed by Varaha, his brother would be consumed by a rage so absolute that he would do something no being had ever attempted. He would perform a penance so extreme, so prolonged, so agonizing that Brahma himself would be forced to appear and grant him a wish. And Hiranyakashipu's wish was brilliant. "I cannot be killed by man or animal," he would demand, "not indoors or outdoors, not during the day or at night, not on the ground or in the air, not by any weapon created by gods or men." Brahma, bound by his own laws, would grant the wish, and Hiranyakashipu would become invincible. He would conquer heaven. He would enslave the gods. He would declare himself the supreme being and demand that every creature in the universe worship only him. Anyone who spoke Vishnu's name would be tortured. Anyone who prayed to any god but Hiranyakashipu would be killed. But there was one person who would refuse: his own son. Prahlada, a boy of 5 years old, would be the most devoted worshipper of Vishnu in all the three worlds. No matter what his father did, no matter how many times he was beaten, thrown from cliffs, dropped into snake pits, fed to elephants, poisoned, burned, Prahlada would survive. And he would continue to chant Vishnu's name. "Where is your Vishnu?" Hiranyakashipu would scream at the boy, pointing to a pillar in his palace. "Is he in this pillar?" "He is everywhere," Prahlada would answer quietly. Hiranyakashipu would smash the pillar with his fist, and the pillar would explode. From inside it, a creature would emerge that was neither man nor animal, a being with the body of a man and the head of a lion, Narasimha, Vishnu's fourth avatar. His mane would blaze like fire, his claws would gleam like crescent moons, his roar would shake the foundations of the universe. Narasimha would grab Hiranyakashipu and drag him to the threshold of the palace, neither indoors nor outdoors. He would place the demon across his lap, neither on the ground nor in the air. He would do this at twilight, neither day nor night. And with his claws, which were neither weapon nor tool, he would tear Hiranyakashipu apart. Every condition of the boon honored, every condition of the boon defeated. And Prahlada, the boy who had never stopped believing, would watch his father die and feel not joy, but sadness. Because even monsters were once someone's family. But the story of Prahlada did not end there. Before Narasimha arrived, Hiranyakashipu had tried one more method to kill his son. One that would become the origin of one of India's most beloved festivals. Hiranyakashipu had a sister named Holika, who possessed a magical cloak that made her immune to fire. The plan was simple. Holika would sit in a bonfire with Prahlada on her lap. She would be protected. He would burn. But the gods had other plans. As the fire blazed, the divine cloak would fly from Holika's shoulders and wrap itself around Prahlada. Holika would burn to death. Prahlada would walk out of the fire unharmed. The burning of Holika, evil destroyed by its own weapon, would be celebrated still today as Holika Dahan, the night before Holi. And the next morning, the festival of Holi itself, the festival of colors, would erupt across India. Millions of people throwing colored powder at each other, dancing in the streets, celebrating the triumph of devotion over tyranny, of love over fear, of a 5-year-old boy over the most powerful demon in the universe. After the terror of Narasimha, Vishnu's next avatar would arrive not with violence, but with a trick so elegant that the demons themselves would applaud it. A new demon king had risen, Mahabali, grandson of Prahlada. But Mahabali was not evil. He was, by all accounts, a good king, just, generous, beloved by his people. His only flaw was that he had grown too powerful. He had conquered the three worlds, and the gods, once again displaced, would beg Vishnu for help. Vishnu would appear at Mahabali's court, not as a warrior, but as Vamana, a tiny Brahmin dwarf, humble, unassuming, carrying nothing but a wooden umbrella and a water pot. "Great king," Vamana would say, "I ask for only 3 paces of land, whatever I can cover in 3 steps." Mahabali would laugh. 3 steps? For a dwarf? The request was absurd. He would agree instantly. And Vamana would begin to grow. His first step, he would grow to cosmic proportions and cover the entire earth. His second step, he would stride across the heavens, claiming everything above. 2 steps, and there was nothing left. Where shall I place my 3rd step? Vamana would ask, now towering above the universe, galaxies reflecting in his eyes. Mahabali, understanding that he had been outplayed by God himself, would kneel. "Place it on my head." And Vishnu would gently push Mahabali down, not to hell, but to Sutala, a beautiful underworld where he would rule as king forever. And once a year, Mahabali would be allowed to return to Earth to visit his people. That annual return would still be celebrated today as Onam, one of India's most joyful festivals. Millions of people decorating their homes with flowers, preparing feasts, welcoming back a demon king who was so good that even God respected him. Not every avatar came with gentleness. Parashurama, Rama with the axe, would be Vishnu's answer to a world where the warrior class had become corrupt. The Kshatriyas, the kings and warriors, had grown drunk on power. They would oppress the Brahmins, steal from the poor, and rule through fear instead of dharma. And so Vishnu would descend as a Brahmin himself, but a Brahmin unlike any other. A priest who could fight. Parashurama would carry an axe given to him by Shiva, a weapon that could cut through anything, and he would use it. 21 times he would circle the earth, destroying every corrupt warrior he found. The rivers would run red, the thrones would stand empty. It was a purge, violent, absolute, and necessary. Because in the Hindu view, even righteous violence served a purpose. It reset the balance, cleared the rot, and allowed a new generation to begin. But of all Vishnu's avatars, one would tower above the rest. One would become the most beloved figure in all of Hinduism, the hero of the Ramayana, the greatest love story and war epic ever told. His name was Rama. But his story is so vast that it deserves its own chapter. And then there was Krishna. If Rama was the perfect man, the ideal that humanity should strive toward, Krishna was something far more dangerous. He was the god who refused to be put in a box. Warrior and flute player, philosopher and prankster. The speaker of the most sacred text in Hinduism and the stealer of butter from his mother's kitchen. Krishna's story would begin with a prophecy and a massacre. His uncle, King Kamsa of Mathura, would receive a warning from the heavens. The 8th child of your sister Devaki will kill you. Kamsa, cruel, paranoid, desperate to survive, would imprison his own sister and her husband, Vasudeva. And every time Devaki gave birth, Kamsa would take the baby and smash its head against the stone floor. 6 children, 6 murders. The 7th, Balarama, would be miraculously transferred to another womb and survive. But the 8th child was the one Kamsa feared most. On the night Krishna was born, the impossible would happen. The prison doors would swing open on their own. The guards would fall into a deep, enchanted sleep. Rain would pour from the sky in sheets, and Vasudeva, carrying his newborn son in a basket on his head, would walk out of the prison, cross the flooding Yamuna River, and deliver the child to a cowherd family in the village of Vrindavan. The river, recognizing the god in the basket, would part for Vasudeva. The serpent Shesha would rise from the water and spread his hood over the baby to shield him from the rain. And so Krishna, the supreme being, the creator of universes, would grow up as a cowherd's son, playing in the mud, stealing butter from the neighbors, getting scolded by his foster mother Yashoda, who had no idea that the mischievous boy tugging at her sari was the god who held the cosmos in his belly. One day, the other children would complain to Yashoda, "Krishna is eating dirt." Yashoda would march over and demand that Krishna open his mouth. And when he did, When the boy parted his lips for his mother, she would see the entire universe inside. Stars, galaxies, oceans, mountains, all of time and all of space, spinning silently inside the mouth of a child. Yashoda would stagger. The vision would overwhelm her mind. And then Krishna, because he was kind, because his mother's sanity was more important than cosmic truth, would make her forget. She would blink and see only a little boy with butter on his face. As Krishna grew older, he would become the most magnetic being Vrindavan had ever known. The gopis, the cowherd women of the village, would be drawn to him with a love that transcended the physical. When Krishna played his flute at night by the banks of the Yamuna, every woman in the village would leave her home, her husband, her children, and walk toward the music as if pulled by a force beyond their control. And Krishna, in the most extraordinary act of divine love, would multiply himself. He would dance with each gopi simultaneously, each woman believing she alone danced with him. This was the Rasa Leela, the divine dance, and it would become one of the most painted, sung and celebrated moments in all of Hindu art. But among all the gopis, one would stand apart: Radha. Her love for Krishna would be so absolute, so consuming, so devastating that it would transcend the boundary between human and divine. Radha and Krishna would become inseparable, not as husband and wife, but as something deeper. Two halves of a single soul, the lover and the beloved, the seeker and the sought. And yet, Krishna would leave Vrindavan. He would leave Radha, leave the gopis, leave the simple life of a cowherd, because he had a mission. Kamsa was still alive, and the prophecy had to be fulfilled. Krishna would travel to Mathura, enter the arena where Kamsa had set a trap of wrestlers and a mad elephant, and destroy them all. Then he would grab Kamsa by the hair, drag him from his throne, and kill him with his bare hands. The prophecy complete, the tyrant dead, and the cowherd boy would become a king, a warrior, a statesman, the most pivotal figure in the Mahabharata, the advisor who would guide the Pandavas through the greatest war in history. But Krishna would never return to Vrindavan, and Radha would wait for him for the rest of her life. Still today, in temples across India, Krishna is never worshipped alone. Radha stands beside him, because the Hindus understood that God without love is incomplete, and love without longing is not really love at all. The ninth avatar would be the most controversial, because it would claim one of the world's great religious founders as a Hindu god in disguise. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, would be recognized by many Hindu traditions as the ninth incarnation of Vishnu. But why would the preserver descend as a teacher who rejected the Vedas, rejected the caste system, rejected the very rituals that Hinduism held sacred? The answer, depending on which text you read, ranged from profound to devious. In one interpretation, Vishnu descended as Buddha out of pure compassion. The world had become choked with animal sacrifice. Priests had turned religion into a business of blood. And so Vishnu came as a gentle teacher who said, "Stop the killing. Find peace within." The path to liberation does not require the death of another being. In another, darker interpretation, Vishnu descended as Buddha to deliberately mislead the demons. The Asuras had grown powerful by performing Vedic rituals, the same rituals the gods used to maintain their strength. By teaching the demons to abandon these rituals, Buddha would weaken them, allowing the gods to regain their advantage. Whether the motive was compassion or strategy, the result was the same. A religion was born that would spread across the entire world, and Hindu mythology would claim it as another chapter in Vishnu's eternal mission. But that story belongs to the end of this journey. For now, know this. 9 times, Vishnu has descended. 9 times, the balance has been restored, and the world still turns, battered, imperfect, but alive. The 10th descent is still waiting, and when it comes, it will not bring balance. It will bring an ending. The Kalki Purana would describe what the world would look like when the 10th avatar arrived, not as prophecy, but as recognition. Because anyone reading it would feel a strange, uncomfortable familiarity. In the age before Kalki's coming, the texts would say rulers would be no better than bandits, taxing the poor and protecting only themselves. Priests would sell their blessings to the highest bidder. Marriage would become a transaction. Children would not care for their parents. Teachers would teach only what the wealthy wanted to hear. Rain would fail. Crops would fail. People would live shorter lives with more suffering, and they would call this progress because they would have forgotten what flourishing actually looked like. The rivers would carry poison. The forests would be silent. Animals would grow smaller and more fearful with each generation. And into the deepest darkness the Kali Yuga could produce, Kalki would appear. Not in a city, not in a palace. In a small village in the Himalayan foothills, born to a Brahmin family, raising himself quietly while the world rotted around him. Then, at the moment the darkness became total, he would receive a divine sword from Shiva himself, mount a white horse whose hooves would not touch the ground, and ride. His sword would blaze. His horse would be swifter than thought, and he would not come to teach. The age of teaching would have ended long before, because there would be no one left who wanted to learn. He would come to end, to close the Kali Yuga, to complete the great cycle, and in the silence that followed, to make room for the golden age to begin again. This is what the 10th avatar would be. Not a savior in the Western sense, not a rescuer who would swoop in and make everything fine, but the final necessary act of a universe that had completed one full revolution of its wheel. A cosmic reset, not mercy and not cruelty, simply the nature of time, doing what time has always done. The wheel reaches the bottom, and then it rises. But before that ending, there was one more story that had to be told. The greatest love story in Hindu mythology. The tale of a prince, a princess, and a demon with 10 heads. If the Mahabharata was the story of everything, a cosmic encyclopedia of war, politics, and philosophy, then the Ramayana was the story of one man's heart. Prince Rama would be everything a human being could aspire to be: brave, honest, obedient, loving, just. He was the perfect son, the perfect brother, the perfect warrior, and his story would begin not with a battle, but with a betrayal. Rama was the eldest son of King Dasharatha of Ayodhya, a city so magnificent that its streets would be paved with gems and its walls would gleam with gold. He was the rightful heir to the throne. His people loved him. His father adored him. His 3 brothers, Bharata, Lakshmana, and Shatrughna, would have died for him without hesitation. But on the eve of Rama's coronation, everything would shatter. Queen Kaikeyi, Dasharatha's second wife, Bharata's mother, had once saved the king's life in battle. In gratitude, he had promised her 2 wishes, to be claimed at any time. For years, she had held them in reserve, but now, poisoned by the whispers of her servant Manthara, she would finally use them. My first wish, banish Rama to the forest for 14 years. My second wish, crown my son Bharata as king. Dasharatha would collapse. His heart would nearly stop. He would beg, weep, plead on his knees. But a promise was a promise. In the Hindu world, a king's word was more sacred than his life. And Rama, learning of the exile, would not argue, would not resist, would not even show anger. He would simply remove his royal robes, put on the bark cloth of a hermit, and walk into the forest. But he would not walk alone. Sita, his wife, his heart, the most beautiful woman in the world, would refuse to stay behind. "Where you go, I go," she would say. "The forest is my palace if you are in it." And Lakshmana, his younger brother, fierce and loyal, would join them. "You are my king," he would tell Rama. "The throne means nothing. I go where you go." And so the three of them would disappear into the wilderness. Behind them, King Dasharatha, unable to bear the separation, would die of a broken heart, literally. His last word would be Rama. For 13 years, Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana would live in the forest. They would build huts from leaves and grass. They would eat roots, berries, and wild honey. They would sleep on the bare ground, their royal bodies slowly hardening to the rough texture of a hermit's life. But the forest was not empty. It was a world unto itself, teeming with sages who had renounced everything to pursue enlightenment, with magical creatures who lived between the human and divine realms, and with demons who lurked in the shadows, feeding on fear. Rama would become the forest protector. Sages, who had been terrorized by Rakshasas for years, would beg for his help, and he would answer every time. He would kill Virada, a demon who had tried to kidnap Sita. He would destroy Kara and Dushana, two Rakshasa commanders who led an army of 14,000 demons, and Rama would face them alone, his arrows singing through the air in an unbroken stream, until not one demon remained standing. It was this slaughter, 14,000 demons killed by a single man, that would reach the ears of Ravana. And it would be this, more than anything, that would draw the demon king's attention to the exiled prince. But what sealed Sita's fate was not Rama's victory. It was his rejection of Ravana's sister. Shurpanakha, a Rakshasa princess, would wander into Rama's camp and fall instantly in love with the prince. She would offer herself to him. Rama, devoted to Sita, would gently refuse. She would turn to Lakshmana. He would refuse more harshly. And Shurpanakha, humiliated and enraged, would lunge at Sita, intending to devour her. Lakshmana would draw his sword and slice off Shurpanakha's nose and ears. She would flee, bleeding and howling, back to Lanka. She would throw herself at Ravana's feet and cry, "There is a woman in the forest, Sita. She is the most beautiful creature in the three worlds, and her husband has humiliated your sister." Ravana's eyes would narrow, not with anger for his sister, with desire for Sita. And so the wheels of catastrophe would begin to turn. Ravana, he was the king of Lanka, an island fortress of gold that floated in the southern seas, its towers so tall they scraped the belly of the clouds, its walls inlaid with gems that made the entire city glow at night like a fallen constellation. Ravana had 10 heads, each one capable of independent thought, each one a master of a different branch of knowledge. He had 20 arms, each one strong enough to uproot mountains. His mind was so brilliant that he had mastered all 4 Vedas, the holiest texts in Hinduism. And his voice, when he chanted them, was so beautiful that even the gods would pause to listen. This was the paradox of Ravana. He was not ignorant. He was not stupid. He was, by some measures, the most accomplished being in the universe. He was a scholar, a musician, a warrior, and a devotee of Shiva so fervent that he had once lifted Mount Kailash itself, Shiva's own home, with his bare hands, just to demonstrate his power. Shiva, amused by the audacity, had pressed the mountain down with his toe and trapped Ravana beneath it. Ravana had sung hymns of such beauty from under the mountain that Shiva had released him and blessed him. He was the most powerful demon who had ever lived, and he wanted Sita. Ravana would devise a plan. He would send a golden deer, a magical illusion, into the forest near Sita's hut. The deer would be so beautiful, so enchanting, that Sita would beg Rama to catch it for her. Rama, unable to deny her anything, would chase the deer deep into the forest, and Lakshmana, hearing what he thought was Rama's cry for help, would reluctantly leave Sita's side. The moment she was alone, Ravana would appear. Disguised as a wandering holy man, he would approach her hut. And when Sita stepped forward to offer him food, as was the duty of any host, he would reveal his true form, grab her, and fly south in his chariot, pulled by demon horses. Sita would scream. She would fight. She would tear off her jewelry and throw it down toward the earth, leaving a trail for Rama to follow. But Ravana was too fast, too powerful, too far gone in his obsession, but not everyone would fail Sita in that moment. From the treetops above, where he had been resting his ancient wings, Jatayu would see it all. The king of eagles, the great vulture who had been alive since the beginning of the Treta Yuga, who had known Rama's father Dasharatha as a friend, who had sworn to watch over the forest and every soul who lived within it. He would see the golden chariot. He would see Sita's face, terror and defiance mixed together, beautiful even in suffering. He would see Ravana's 10 heads turning south toward Lanka, and something ancient would ignite in the old bird's chest. He was very old. His wings were not what they had been. Centuries of living had not been kind to the feathers that had once carried him above the clouds. But Jatayu would hurl himself into the sky regardless. He would collide with Ravana's chariot like a living thunderbolt. His talons would tear through demon horses. His beak would smash against Ravana's arms. He would fight with everything left in him, every remaining year of his ancient life converted into a few minutes of desperate, magnificent courage. Ravana would stare at the bird with something almost like respect. "Old one," he would say, "step aside. This is not your war." "It is now," Jatayu would answer, and strike again. But Ravana was not merely a demon king. He was the most powerful warrior alive. He would draw his sword and slice through Jatayu's wings, the great feathered limbs that had known the wind since the age before human memory. And they would fall slowly, like leaves from a dying tree. Jatayu would crash to the earth below, his body broken, his life bleeding away into the forest soil. But he would not die, not yet. He would hold on, with the same stubborn courage he had shown in battle. Waiting. Because he had something to tell Rama. He would take her to Lanka and place her in a garden of Ashoka trees, not harming her, not touching her, but demanding that she become his queen. "Forget Rama," he would say. "He is a homeless wanderer. I am a king of kings. I can give you the universe." And Sita, sitting beneath the Ashoka tree, surrounded by demon guards, separated from everyone she loved, would look at Ravana with eyes that held no fear, only contempt. "You are 10-headed, she would say, "but you have not one brain among them. Rama will come, and when he does, you will understand the difference between a king and a man." Meanwhile, Rama would return to find the hut empty. And in that moment, for the first and only time in the entire epic, the perfect prince would break. He would fall to his knees. He would call Sita's name to the trees, to the rivers, to the animals. "Have you seen her? Where is she? Tell me." His grief would be so overwhelming that Lakshmana, the fierce warrior who feared nothing, would weep watching his brother's pain. But grief in the Ramayana would become fuel. First, though, Rama and Lakshmana would follow the trail. Broken branches, flowers scattered from Sita's hair, and then, in a clearing of dead leaves, a bird, old, massive, his wings cut away at the roots, his body soaked in his own blood. Jatayu. When Rama saw him, he would understand immediately. He would run to the fallen eagle and kneel, lifting the great head into his lap as gently as if cradling a child. "Rama," the eagle would whisper, "I tried. I know. Ravana, 10 heads. His chariot went south. She called your name." And then Jatayu, the oldest bird in the world, who had witnessed the rise and fall of kingdoms, who had flown since before Rama's grandfather's grandfather was born, would close his ancient eyes. In the Hindu tradition, a being who gives its life in service of Rama achieves moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. And so Jatayu would not descend to another womb. He would rise in that moment directly to Vishnu's heaven. The eagle, who had been too old and too broken to win, but too devoted to step aside, would bypass every law of karma and go straight home. Rama would perform the funeral rites himself. He would gather wood and build a pyre for the old bird, chanting the sacred words that carried souls safely through death. A small act, a prince lighting a fire for a vulture. But the Ramayana would remember it as one of the most defining moments in the entire epic. Because this was what separated Rama from every other hero. He stopped, even in his grief, even with Sita lost and Ravana's trail going cold, to give a dead bird the honor it deserved. Dharma did not pause for convenience. Rama would meet Hanuman. Hanuman, the monkey god, would be the most extraordinary character in all of Hindu mythology. Son of the wind god, blessed with the power to grow to any size, to fly, to lift mountains, to burn cities with his tail. But more than his power, it was his devotion that defined him. From the moment he met Rama, Hanuman would love him with a purity that transcended loyalty, transcended friendship, transcended even worship. It was something beyond all of these, a love so total that Hanuman would later tear open his own chest to show that Rama and Sita lived inside his heart. Literally. Their images would be painted on his beating heart. Hanuman would fly across the ocean to Lanka, a leap so vast that it would become legendary. He would find Sita in the Ashoka garden. He would kneel before her and offer her Rama's ring as proof that rescue was coming. "Come with me," Hanuman would urge her. "I can carry you back." But Sita would refuse. Rama must come himself. He must defeat Ravana. This is a matter of honor, not just mine, but his. And so Hanuman would deliver his message, but not before setting Lanka on fire. He would allow himself to be captured, and when Ravana's demons would wrap his tail in oil-soaked cloth and light it, Hanuman would grow to enormous size and leap from rooftop to rooftop, dragging his burning tail across the golden city. Palaces would crumble, towers would melt. Lanka's legendary beauty would be scarred forever. Then he would fly back to Rama with the news. Sita was alive. Lanka could be reached. War was the only way, and so the war would begin. But before the war, Rama would need an army, and the army he would find was the most unlikely fighting force in the history of mythology. The alliance with Sugriva came at a price, and a moral complexity that the Ramayana would never shy away from. Sugriva and his brother Vali were both Vanara kings. But Vali had exiled his younger brother on a misunderstanding. Years earlier, Vali had gone into a cave to fight a demon, ordered Sugriva to wait at the entrance, and hadn't returned for months. When blood seeped under the door, Sugriva had assumed the worst, sealed the cave with a boulder, and returned home to find his brother very much alive, very much angry, and in no mood for explanations. Vali had seen it as betrayal. He had seized Sugriva's throne and his wife, and driven his brother into exile, but Vali was no ordinary enemy. He had received a boon. Anyone who fought him face to face would automatically lose half their strength to him. He was, in direct single combat, essentially unbeatable. And so Sugriva had hidden on Mount Rishyamukha, the one place Vali could not enter, because of an ancient curse tied to a sage's rage. And there he had sat, waiting for fortune to change. He would wait for Rama. The deal was simple and explicit. Rama would kill Vali. Sugriva would give his army to Rama's cause, but Rama's method would trouble scholars and philosophers for thousands of years. He would not fight Vali directly. The boon made that futile. He would shoot him from behind a tree while Sugriva fought him in the open, concealed in the shadows, an arrow loosed while Vali was distracted. When the arrow struck and Vali fell, he would confront Rama as he died. His voice would not be angry. It would be wondering. "You killed me in secret," he would say. "You are supposed to be righteous. How is this Dharma?" And Rama would answer, clearly, directly, without flinching. "You stole your brother's throne. You took his wife against all law. You ruled through force what belonged to another. Justice cannot always choose its weapon." Whether this satisfied Vali or the millions of readers who would wrestle with this scene across 3,000 years remained a matter of debate that the Ramayana seemed to invite rather than resolve. The epic was not a manual for perfect heroes. It was a study in how good men make imperfect choices in a world that does not offer clean options. Vali would die. Sugriva would reclaim his throne, and the Vanaras would pledge their civilization to the rescue of Sita. He would ally with Sugriva, the exiled king of the Vanaras, a race of divine monkey beings who lived in the forests of southern India. In exchange for helping Sugriva reclaim his throne from his brother Vali, the Vanaras would pledge their entire civilization to Rama's cause. And what a civilization it was. Millions of Vanaras, warriors who could leap across rivers, uproot trees to use as weapons, and hurl boulders the size of houses. Their generals were demigods: Angada, the young prince with fists like iron; Jambavan, the ancient bear king who had lived since the beginning of time; Nala, the architect who could make stones float on water; and Hanuman, always Hanuman, the heart of the army, the soul of the war. But before the bridge, something would happen that would alter the course of the war entirely. Ravana's own brother would cross sides. Vibhishana was everything Ravana was not: principled, soft-spoken, devoted to Dharma, repelled by his brother's actions from the first moment Sita had been brought to Lanka. He had stood in Ravana's court and said the words that needed to be said: "Return her. This is wrong. She is another man's wife and another man's heart. Our family will be destroyed for your desire, and we will deserve it." Ravana had listened with patience, eroding into contempt. When Vibhishana persisted, the demon king did what proud men always do when they cannot bear truth. He expelled his brother from his kingdom. In front of the entire court, with every demon minister watching, he told Vibhishana to leave Lanka and never return. And so Vibhishana had flown north alone, toward the army, preparing to invade his former home. When he arrived at the Vanara camp and asked to join Rama's side, the reaction was not warm. "He is a demon," the generals argued. He is Ravana's blood. He could be a spy. He could betray us at the moment that matters most, take our battle plans back to Lanka, wait until we are most vulnerable, and then turn. Even Sugriva, who had pledged everything to this cause, counseled caution. But Rama's answer would become one of the most quoted passages in all of Hindu literature. Anyone who comes to me seeking refuge, friend or enemy, mortal or demon from any world, if they come with sincerity, I will protect them. This is my vow. I do not turn away the one who has trusted me. Vibhishana was welcomed, and he would prove invaluable, not as a warrior, but as the mind that Lanka had discarded. He knew the island's defenses. He knew which gates were weakest. He knew the secret of Ravana's apparent immortality. He knew which demon commanders were fearless and which could be broken. In choosing Dharma over blood, Vibhishana had handed Rama the key to victory before a single soldier had set foot on enemy ground. Together, they would face an impossible obstacle: the ocean. Lanka was an island, separated from the mainland by 100 miles of churning sea. The monkey army could not swim that distance. They could not fly, not all of them. And so they would build a bridge. Nala would design it. Millions of Vanaras would carry stones and boulders to the shore, inscribing each one with the name Rama before dropping it into the water. And the stones, against every law of nature, would float. The name of God, written in faith, would defy gravity itself. For 5 days, the bridge would grow, stone by stone, mile by mile, across the open ocean. Still today, satellite images would show a chain of limestone shoals stretching between India and Sri Lanka, a formation called Adam's Bridge, or in Hindu tradition, Rama Setu, the Bridge of Rama. The battle for Lanka would be the most spectacular war in the Ramayana. Ravana's demon army was vast, 1 million Rakshasas, each one a shapeshifter, each one capable of magic that could bend reality. They would fight with illusions, turning invisible, multiplying into copies of themselves, raining fire from the sky. But the Vanaras would match them, not with magic, but with raw, primal fury. Monkey warriors would leap onto demon generals, biting and clawing. Bears would charge through demon formations like living avalanches. Trees, torn from the earth, would be swung like clubs. The tide would turn against Rama when Ravana's son entered the battle. Indrajit, Meghnad, the conqueror of Indra, was the most dangerous warrior in Lanka. He had once defeated Indra himself, the king of the gods, and dragged him back to Lanka in chains. His mastery of celestial weapons was unmatched, and he possessed one weapon that no one, not even Rama, could counter: the Nagastra, the serpent weapon. Indrajit would become invisible and rain the Nagastra down on the battlefield. Thousands of magical serpents would fall from the sky, each one coiling around a Vanara warrior, binding them in venomous paralysis. Rama and Lakshmana themselves would be struck. The serpents would wrap around their bodies, squeezing the life from them. Both brothers would collapse, their skin turning blue from the venom. The monkey army would wail. Hanuman would kneel beside Rama's body, pressing his ear to his chest, listening for a heartbeat that was growing fainter with each passing moment. But Jambavan, the ancient bear, would know the cure. "There is a mountain in the Himalayas," he would whisper to Hanuman, "Dronagiri. On its slopes grow 4 sacred herbs, Mrita Sanjivani, the one that can bring the dead back to life. You must fly there and return before dawn. If the sun rises and they have not been healed, they will die." Hanuman would launch himself into the sky like a comet. He would cross the entire breadth of India in a single leap, his body blazing through the atmosphere, his shadow racing across kingdoms and forests and rivers. When he reached the Himalayas, he would find Dronagiri, a mountain glowing with the light of 1,000 medicinal herbs. But which one was Marita Sanjeevani? The herbs all looked the same. The mountain was vast. Dawn was approaching. And so Hanuman would do what only Hanuman could do. He would reach down, wrap his arms around the base of the entire mountain, and tear it from the earth. The whole mountain. Roots, soil, herbs, and all. He would hoist it above his head and fly back to Lanka, carrying a Himalayan peak across the sky like a man carrying a potted plant. When he arrived, the mountain held above his head, silhouetted against the first light of dawn. The healing herbs would release their fragrance across the battlefield. Lakshmana, inches from death, would breathe in the scent and rise. Rama would open his eyes. The monkey army would roar. The final battle would be between Rama and Ravana alone. Ravana with his 10 heads and 20 arms, each wielding a different weapon. Rama with a single bow, but that bow was divine, given to him by the sage Agastya, who had received it from Vishnu himself. Every time Rama would cut off one of Ravana's heads, another would grow back. The demon seemed truly immortal. But Agastya had whispered a secret. Ravana's life force was not in his heads. It was in his navel, a pool of divine nectar hidden inside his body. Rama would draw the Brahmastra, the most powerful weapon in Hindu mythology, a weapon charged with the energy of Brahma himself. He would aim not at Ravana's heads, but at his heart. The arrow would streak across the battlefield like a bolt of concentrated destiny and pierce Ravana's chest, penetrating straight through to the nectar in his navel. Ravana would stagger, his 10 heads would scream, 10 different screams, 10 different expressions of disbelief. And then the king of Lanka would fall. The earth would tremble with the impact of his body. And in the Ashoka garden, Sita would feel the ground shake and know, without being told, that it was over. Rama and Sita would be reunited. But the moment would not be what anyone expected. Instead of running to embrace her, Rama would stand still. His face would be stone. "You have lived in another man's house for months," he would say. "How can I take you back without proof of your purity?" Sita, who had endured captivity, loneliness, and terror without breaking, would finally break. Not from Ravana's cruelty, but from her husband's doubt. She would order a fire to be built, and she would walk into it. The flames would rise around her. The entire army would watch in horror. Lakshmana would scream. Hanuman would cover his eyes, but the fire would not burn her. Agni, the god of fire, would carry Sita out of the flames unharmed. Her purity was proven. The fire had refused to touch her, and Rama would weep. He would hold her. He would later say that he had never doubted her, that the test was for the world, not for him. But the damage was done. And in some tellings of the story, this moment would cast a shadow over their love that would never fully lift. They would return to Ayodhya, flying in the Pushpaka Vimana, Ravana's own flying chariot, seized as a prize of war. And the people of Ayodhya, who had spent 14 years in mourning, would light millions of oil lamps to guide their prince home through the darkness. That night of lights would still be celebrated today as Diwali, the festival of lights. The biggest holiday in the Hindu calendar, millions of candles, millions of prayers, millions of families remembering the night a prince came home. But why would Shiva, the most powerful god in the universe, choose to live as a beggar on the edges of society, smeared in the ashes of the dead? That answer would require understanding the most explosive conflict in all of Hindu mythology. If the Ramayana was the story of one man's heart, the Mahabharata was the story of everything else. Every human emotion, every moral question, every shade of grey between good and evil. At over 100,000 verses, it was the longest poem ever written, 7 times longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. And at its center was a war so devastating that it would reshape the world. But before the war, there was a family. The Kuru dynasty, one of the greatest royal families in all of Hindu mythology, would split into 2 branches. The Pandavas, 5 brothers, sons of King Pandu, each fathered by a different god. And the Kauravas, 100 brothers, sons of the blind king Dhritarashtra, led by the eldest Duryodhana. 5 against 100. And yet, from the moment they were born, the 5 would be everything the 100 were not. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, would be the son of Dharma, the god of righteousness. He would never lie. He could never bring himself to deceive, even when deception was the only path to survival. This would be his greatest strength and his most crippling weakness. Bhima, the second brother, would be the son of Vayu, the wind god. His strength was limitless. He could uproot trees with his bare hands. He could eat enough food for 100 men. His rage, once ignited, could not be contained by any force in the 3 worlds. Arjuna, the third and the hero of the Mahabharata, would be the son of Indra, the king of the gods. He would be the greatest archer who had ever lived. His aim was so precise that he could shoot a fish's eye while looking only at its reflection in water. He was handsome, skilled, and humble, the kind of warrior that songs were written about. Nakula and Sahadeva, the twins, would be sons of the Ashvini Kumars, the divine horsemen. Nakula was the most handsome man alive. Sahadeva could see the future, but was cursed never to reveal it. Together, the 5 Pandavas would share one wife, Draupadi, the fire-born princess, one of the most complex women in all of world literature. She had emerged from a sacred fire, fully grown, dark-skinned and beautiful, with a garland of blue lotuses in her hair and eyes that blazed with an intelligence that unsettled kings. But if the Pandavas were light, Duryodhana was shadow. The eldest, Kaurava, would spend his entire life consumed by one emotion: jealousy. The Pandavas were more talented, more loved, more destined for greatness, and Duryodhana could not bear it. He would try to kill them as children, poisoning Bhima, setting their house on fire. Each time, they would survive. Each time, his hatred would grow. And then came the game of dice. Duryodhana, unable to defeat the Pandavas in battle, would challenge Yudhishthira to a game of dice, knowing that the virtuous king could not refuse a challenge. But the dice were loaded. The game was rigged, and Yudhishthira, caught in the grip of a gambler's madness, would lose everything. First, his wealth, then his kingdom, then his brothers, then himself. And then, in a moment that would echo through millennia, he would wager Draupadi and lose. Duryodhana would order Draupadi dragged into the court by her hair. She had been in her private chambers. She was wearing a single garment. She was in her monthly cycle, a time when by sacred law no woman should be seen by any man outside her family. None of that mattered to Duryodhana. Dushasana would grab her by her long dark hair and drag her across the marble floor into the full assembly in front of kings, elders, warriors, and sages. Hundreds of the most powerful men in the world would watch as a queen was humiliated. She is no longer a queen, Duryodhana would sneer, slapping his thigh. "She is a slave, one in a game. She belongs to us now." And then Dushasana would begin to pull at her sari, to strip her naked in front of the entire court. Draupadi would scream for help. She would look at her 5 husbands, the greatest warriors alive, and they would sit frozen, bound by the rules of the game they had lost. Yudhishthira, the righteous king, would stare at the floor. Bhima, whose strength could uproot mountains, would grip the armrests of his seat until the wood cracked, but he would not rise. Arjuna, the greatest archer in the world, would close his eyes. The elders, Bhishma, the grandfather of both clans who had taken a vow to protect the throne, would sit in agonized silence. Drona, the great teacher, would look away. Vidura, the wise minister, would protest, but no one would listen. This moment, the disrobing of Draupadi, would become the moral turning point of the entire Mahabharata. It was the moment when every man in that room failed. When duty, honor, law, and tradition all collapsed in the face of evil, and not one person with the power to stop it would act. And so Draupadi would do what no mortal in that room could do. She would pray. She would close her eyes and call out to Krishna, Vishnu's 8th avatar, who was present in the court as a friend and advisor. And Krishna would respond. Silently, invisibly, he would extend her sari, making it infinite. Dushasana would pull and pull, meter after meter, but the fabric would never end. He would collapse from exhaustion, the floor buried in cloth, and Draupadi would still be covered. But the damage was done. Draupadi, her hair still disheveled, would stand before the court and make a vow that would chill every person in that room. "I will not tie my hair again until it is washed in the blood of Dushasana." This was not a metaphor. She meant it, and she would keep that vow. The Pandavas would be exiled, 13 years in the forest, the last year spent in disguise. If they were discovered during the 13th year, the exile would reset. It was a punishment designed to be unbearable. But they would endure. And when the 13 years ended, they would return to claim their kingdom. Duryodhana would refuse to give back even 5 villages, not even 5 needle points of land. War was inevitable. And this was where Krishna, the most beloved god in Hinduism, the cowherd who played the flute, the lover of Radha, the trickster who stole butter as a child, would reveal his true nature. On the eve of the battle, Arjuna would ride his chariot to the center of the battlefield at Kurukshetra. He would look across at the opposing army and see not strangers, but family. His cousins, his teachers, his grandfather Bhishma, who had held him on his lap as a child. His guru Drona, who had taught him everything he knew about archery. And Arjuna, the greatest warrior alive, would drop his bow. "I cannot do this," he would tell Krishna, who was serving as his charioteer. "These are my people. How can killing them bring anything good? I would rather die unarmed than spill the blood of my own family." And Krishna would speak. What followed would become the Bhagavad Gita, the most sacred text in Hinduism, a 700-verse dialogue between God and man on the nature of duty, death, and the meaning of existence. It would be recited in temples, studied in universities, quoted by Gandhi, Oppenheimer, and Thoreau. It would be translated into every major language on earth. Krishna's core message was this: "You are a warrior, Arjuna. Fighting is your dharma, your sacred duty. You did not choose this war, but you cannot walk away from it. The body dies, but the soul is eternal. No one truly kills, and no one truly dies. The soul simply moves from one body to another, like a person changing clothes. Do your duty, Krishna would say, but surrender the outcome. Act, but do not be attached to the results. This is the path to liberation. And then, in a moment that Arjuna had not asked for and could never have prepared for, Krishna would reveal his true form. Not the handsome young man with the flute, not the charioteer, but Vishnu, the infinite, the all-encompassing, the everything. Arjuna would see the entire universe inside Krishna's body. Every star, every god, every demon, every creature that had ever lived or would ever live. All of them burning inside a single cosmic form with 1,000,000 eyes and 1,000,000 mouths. The living and the dead swirling together in an endless fire. Arjuna would tremble. His hair would stand on end. His knees would buckle. "I see everything," he would whisper. "All of creation, being born and destroyed inside you. I see the warriors on this field, already dead, already swallowed by your mouths. What are you?" And Krishna would answer with words that would echo through eternity. "I am time, the destroyer of worlds, and I have come to consume all things." Arjuna would pick up his bow. The war of Kurukshetra would last 18 days. 18 days of carnage so absolute that the ancient texts would describe rivers of blood flowing between mountains of corpses. The battlefield would stretch across a plain so vast that the armies on each side could not see each other's edges. Millions of warriors from every kingdom in the known world would march into that field. Most would never march out. Day one would belong to Bhishma, the grandfather. He was over 100 years old, but he fought like a hurricane. Arrows would pour from his bow in an unbroken stream, cutting down Pandava soldiers by the thousands. He had been given a boon. He could choose the moment of his own death. Until he chose it, no weapon could kill him. For 10 days, Bhishma would dominate the battlefield. The Pandavas would throw everything at him, their best warriors, their most powerful weapons. And he would swat them aside like insects. The old man was simply too good, too experienced, too blessed. And so the Pandavas would be forced to use the one weapon that could stop him, not a blade, but a person. Shikhandi, a warrior who had been born a woman in a previous life. Bhishma, bound by his own code of honor, had sworn never to raise a weapon against anyone who had ever been female. The Pandavas would place Shikhandi at the front of their formation, with Arjuna shooting from behind. Bhishma would see Shikhandi and lower his bow. Arjuna's arrows would find him, dozens, hundreds. So many arrows would pierce Bhishma's body that when he fell from his chariot, he would not touch the ground. He would lie suspended on a bed of arrows, his body held above the earth by the sheer number of shafts embedded in his flesh. And there he would remain, alive, conscious, waiting, for 58 days. Choosing not to die until the war was over and the sun turned north. The greatest warrior of the age, dying slowly on a bed of his grandson's arrows, watching the destruction of everything he had built. But Bhishma's fall did not end the war. It intensified it. 3 days later, on the 13th day of Kurukshetra, the war would produce its most heartbreaking chapter. Drona would deploy the Chakra Vyuha, the spinning wheel formation. A military configuration arranged like a vast labyrinth, soldiers arranged in a spiral that rotated as it fought, constantly presenting fresh faces to the enemy, impossible to penetrate unless you knew both how to enter and, crucially, how to get out. In the entire Pandava army, only Arjuna and Krishna knew the complete technique. And on that day, a decoy force would lure Arjuna to the far edge of the battlefield. but Arjuna's 16-year-old son knew how to enter. Abhimanyu had learned it, the stories would say, before he was born. While still in his mother Subhadra's womb, he had listened as Arjuna explained the entry strategy to her during her pregnancy. But before Arjuna could describe the exit, Subhadra had fallen asleep. And so Abhimanyu had entered the world knowing how to walk into the deadliest formation ever conceived, but not how to walk out. When the Pandava generals despaired of breaking the Chakravyuha without Arjuna, the boy stepped forward. "I will enter," he said, his voice carrying no doubt at all. "Follow me through. I can tear the formation apart from the inside, but I will need you to hold the entrance so I am not cut off." The plan was clear. Abhimanyu would enter first. The Pandava commanders would pour through behind him. But Jayadratha, the king of Sindhu, who held a boon that on one single day in his life he could hold back all the Pandavas except Arjuna, chose that moment to exercise his gift. The instant Abhimanyu passed through, Jayadratha sealed the entrance. A wall of demons closed behind the boy. Abhimanyu was inside the Chakravyuha, alone. He should have been overwhelmed in seconds. Instead, he fought like a force of nature. He moved through the spiraling formation like a single flame in the dark, cutting down warriors so fast that veterans on both sides stopped fighting to watch. Karna attacked him, Drona attacked him. The greatest warriors of the Kaurava army engaged him in sequence, and he defeated them all. Inside the killing wheel, a 16-year-old boy was single-handedly dismantling the most sophisticated military formation ever created. Then Karna watched long enough to become afraid. He attacked Abhimanyu from behind, broke his bow from the rear, an act against every law of warrior dharma, a violation of the code that every soldier in that field had sworn to uphold. The other commanders, seeing Karna's lead, followed. They surrounded the boy simultaneously, 6 chariots, 6 generals, attacking from 6 directions at once. They destroyed his chariot, killed his horses, took away his weapons. Abhimanyu fought with the wheel of his broken chariot, with his bare hands. They killed him. When he fell, the battlefield went quiet. Even the Kaurava soldiers stood without cheering. What had just happened was not victory. Everyone on the field, friend and enemy alike, knew exactly what it was. Arjuna returned to find his son dead. He would stand very still, his face emptying of everything, as if the part of him that could feel had retreated somewhere very deep and very dark inside. And then he made the vow that would define the war's next day. Jayadratha sealed the entrance. Jayadratha is responsible. By this time tomorrow, he will be dead, or I will walk into fire. The 14th day of Kurukshetra would be the longest day in the war's history. Arjuna would fight across the entire battlefield with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose, searching for the one man he had promised himself. And when the sun began to set, and Jayadratha had still not been found, when the Kauravas formed a wall of bodies around their king, protecting him until nightfall would void the vow, Krishna would use his divine power to briefly hide the sun, creating a false dusk. The Kauravas, believing night had arrived, would relax their guard. And in that instant, the sun would reappear, and Arjuna's arrow would find Jayadratha in the unexpected light. The vow was kept, but Abhimanyu was still dead. Drona, the teacher, the guru who had trained both the Pandavas and the Kauravas, would take command of the Kaurava army. And Drona was no mere warrior. He was a weapon master who knew techniques that could vaporize entire battalions. Under his command, the Kaurava army would use formations so complex that the Pandava generals could not break them. To defeat Drona, the Pandavas would resort to something that would stain Yudhishthira's soul forever: a lie. Krishna would devise the plan. Drona cannot be defeated while he fights, but if he believes his son Ashwatthama is dead, his grief will make him lower his weapons. Tell him his son has fallen. Yudhishthira, the man who had never lied, whose chariot literally floated above the ground because of his perfect truthfulness, would resist. But Krishna would insist. And so Bhima would kill an elephant named Ashwatthama, and Yudhishthira would announce, "Ashwatthama is dead." And then, under his breath, barely audible, the elephant. But Drona would hear only the first 3 words. His face would crumble, his bow would slip from his fingers. And in that moment of devastating grief, Drishtadyumna, Naitasarn, the Pandava commander who had been born specifically to kill Drona, would step forward and behead him. Yudhishthira's chariot, which had floated an inch above the ground for his entire life, would touch the earth for the first time. The weight of a single lie, a half-truth spoken to win a war, would bring it down. But the cruelest tragedy of Kurukshetra was not Bhishma's fall or Drona's death. It was Karna. Karna was the secret eldest brother of the Pandavas, the firstborn son of their mother Kunti, conceived before her marriage through a divine boon from the sun god Surya. But Kunti, unwed and terrified, had placed the infant in a basket and set him adrift on a river. A charioteer's family would find him and raise him as their own. Karna would grow up believing he was the son of a chariot driver, the lowest rung of the warrior world. He would be mocked, rejected, denied the right to compete against princes despite being the most naturally gifted warrior of his generation. When he entered a tournament and demonstrated skills that rivaled Arjuna's, he would be asked, "What is your lineage?" And when he could not answer, when the court laughed at the charioteer's son, only one person would stand up for him: Duryodhana. The villain of the Mahabharata would crown Karna a king on the spot, giving him a kingdom and his friendship. And from that moment, Karna's loyalty would belong to Duryodhana completely, irrevocably, even unto death. On the eve of the war, Krishna would visit Karna secretly. "You are Kunti's firstborn," Krishna would tell him. "You're the eldest Pandava. If you join your brothers, you will be king. The war will end before it begins." Karna would listen. He would absorb the truth of his birth, the truth that his mother had abandoned him, that his brothers were his enemies, that his entire life had been built on a lie, and he would refuse. "Duryodhana gave me dignity when the world gave me nothing," Karna would say. "I will not betray the one person who believed in me, even if it means fighting my own blood." This was the Mahabharata in a single moment. A good man fighting for the wrong side because loyalty and gratitude mattered more to him than victory. Karna would die on the 17th day. His chariot wheel would sink into the mud, a curse from a Brahmin he had accidentally wronged years earlier. As he struggled to free the wheel, Arjuna, on Krishna's urging, would shoot him. An arrow through the chest of his own brother, who he did not yet know was his brother. Karna would fall, and the sun would dim, because the sun god was mourning his son. And on the final day, Bhima would find Dushasana, the man who had tried to strip Draupadi in the court. He would remember his vow, made years ago in that hall of shame. He would seize Dushasana, tear open his chest with his bare hands, and drink his blood. Then he would carry what remained to Draupadi. She would wash her hair in it and tie it up. Her vow, kept across 14 years of exile and 18 days of war, fulfilled. Duryodhana would be the last to fall, defeated by Bhima in a mace fight, his thighs shattered by a blow that was technically illegal, a breach of the rules of war that Bhima would justify with a single sentence. He broke the rules first when he touched Draupadi. The Pandavas would win, but victory would taste like ashes. Of the millions who had marched to Kurukshetra, almost no one would return. The Pandavas would rule a kingdom of widows and orphans. Yudhishthira, the righteous king, would be haunted by the lies he had told during the war. Small lies, necessary lies, lies that had saved his side but stained his soul. The aftermath would be devastating. The women of Hastinapura, the capital, would pour onto the battlefield looking for their husbands, their sons, their brothers. They would find them, in pieces, scattered across miles of churned and bloodied earth. Gandhari, the mother of the 100 Kauravas, blind from the day she had chosen to cover her eyes in solidarity with her blind husband, would walk across the field and touch the bodies of her sons. 100 sons, all dead, and she would curse Krishna. "You could have prevented this," she would scream at the god who stood before her, his expression unreadable. "You had the power to stop this war. You chose not to, and so I curse you. Your own clan, the Yadavas, will destroy themselves, just as my family destroyed itself. And you will die alone in the wilderness, killed by a hunter's arrow." Krishna would accept the curse. He would not argue, he would not deflect. He would simply bow his head and say, "So be it." And 36 years later, every word of Gandhari's curse would come true. The Yadavas would fight among themselves in a drunken brawl and annihilate one another. And Krishna, the god who had spoken the Bhagavad Gita, who had held the universe in his mouth, who had danced with 1,000 lovers under the Vrindavan moon, would sit alone beneath a tree in the forest. A hunter named Jara, mistaking Krishna's foot for a deer, would shoot an arrow. It would pierce the one vulnerable spot on the god's body, his heel. Krishna would smile at the hunter. "Do not be afraid," he would say. "This was meant to happen." And the god would leave the earth. And the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, would begin. Years later, the Pandavas themselves would renounce their kingdom. Yudhishthira, haunted by the war, would crown a grandson and walk north with his brothers and Draupadi, toward the Himalayas, toward heaven. One by one, they would fall on the mountain path. Draupadi first, then the twins, then Arjuna, then Bhima, each falling because of a hidden flaw, pride, vanity, a secret favoritism. Only Yudhishthira, the righteous king, would reach the gates of heaven, and there a final test would await. He would be shown hell and see his brothers and Draupadi suffering in torment. He would be shown heaven and see Duryodhana sitting in glory. "This is wrong," Yudhishthira would say. "If my brothers are in hell, then I choose to stay with them." And with those words, the choice of suffering alongside loved ones over bliss alone, the illusion would dissolve. It had been a test. Everyone was in heaven, and Yudhishthira, the man who had faltered only once in an entire lifetime of perfect virtue, had passed the final exam. The Pandavas would perform the Ashvamedha Yajna, the horse sacrifice, to cleanse themselves of the sin of killing their own teachers and kinsmen. For years, the ceremony of purification would proceed, but no ritual could fully clean what war had left behind. Yudhishthira would rule justly. He would be a good king. But he would carry the weight of Kurukshetra in his eyes for the rest of his life. visible always to anyone who looked at him long enough. In the end, that was the Mahabharata's deepest truth. The war was won. The Dharma was technically restored, and every survivor was permanently altered by the cost of that restoration. Because Dharma restored through devastation is not the same Dharma that existed before. Something is different in it. Something is missing. Something that cannot be recovered, only mourned. This was the lesson of the Mahabharata. Not that good defeats evil, not that Dharma always wins, but that every victory has a cost. Every war leaves scars that do not heal. Every choice, even the right one, carries consequences that ripple outward forever. And in the end, the only thing that truly matters is not whether you won, but whether you chose love over comfort, truth over convenience, others over yourself. After the wars and the epics, after the cosmic battles and the moral philosophies, Hindu mythology would offer something unexpected, something tender, the story of a family. Shiva, the god of destruction, the wild ascetic, the dancer at the end of time, would fall in love. And his love story would be unlike any other in world mythology. Parvati was the daughter of Himavan, the king of the Himalayas, which meant she was, quite literally, the daughter of a mountain. She was gentle where Shiva was fierce. She was warmth where he was ash. She was the earth where he was the fire. But Shiva had no interest in love. To understand why, you must first hear the story of Sati, the wife who came before Parvati, and whose death would shake the architecture of creation itself. Sati was the daughter of Daksha, one of Brahma's mind-born sons, and one of the most powerful progenitors in the universe. Daksha was influential, proud, and deeply invested in the idea of proper divine hierarchy. He believed in order, in the correct performance of rituals, the maintenance of cosmic boundaries, and the marriage of suitable beings to suitable beings. He had 50 daughters. He had given them to gods and sages of impeccable standing, and then his favorite daughter, his Sati, had chosen Shiva. To Daksha, Shiva was everything divine society should not be. An ascetic who lived among the dead. A god without palace or army. A wanderer who smeared cremation ash on his body, draped a snake around his neck like a garland, and kept the company of ghosts, outcasts, and the spirits of those who had died without being properly mourned. Shiva did not attend divine courts, did not perform rituals, did not even wear clothes in the conventional sense. He was, by Daksha's measure, an embarrassment. But Sati saw past all of that. She saw the infinite that lived behind the ash, the still, calm center inside the wildness, the god who wore death as clothing because he had transcended it. She had loved him with her whole soul from the moment she understood what he was. She married him against her father's explicit wishes, and Daksha never forgave her for it. Years later, Daksha organized the grandest yagna, the greatest sacrificial ceremony in the history of the universe. He invited every god, every sage, every being of divine standing. The guest list was comprehensive, conspicuously, deliberately absent: Shiva and Sati. Sati heard about the ceremony and wanted to attend her father's house. Shiva warned her, "Your father has not forgiven either of us. Do not go. He will not receive you well." But Sati was her father's daughter in at least one quality. She could not walk past a deliberate slight without confronting it. She went to the yagna, and Daksha did the unthinkable. In his own sacrificial hall, in front of every god and sage in the three worlds, he publicly insulted Shiva. He described him as unfit, unclean, an aberration, a creature of corpses and darkness who had no business being counted among the divine. He said everything he had always thought but never spoken aloud, and every being in that hall heard every word. Sati stood among them, surrounded by gods who would not meet her eyes. Looking at the father who had raised her, who had loved her once, who now seemed willing to burn down her marriage to prove a point about propriety. She understood in that moment that he would never stop. That as long as she was Shiva's wife, her father would find a way to diminish what they had together. That there was no conversation she could have, no argument she could make that would reach him. She walked to the sacrificial fire. She stood before it for a long moment. "Since I have been born from your body," she said, her voice perfectly calm, her eyes not on the flames but on her father, "I am returning what you gave me." And she stepped into the fire. When Shiva felt it, meditating on Kailash, suddenly aware of what had happened, the sound that came out of him was not a scream. It was something beneath language. He destroyed Daksha's yagna. He pulled Sati's charred body from the flames and held her. And then he did something that had never been done before in the history of the universe. He refused to let go. He wandered with her body on his shoulders, through heaven, through earth, through the underworld, carrying her across all 14 realms, his grief so total and so uncontained that reality itself began to buckle around him. Stars fell from their orbits, rivers reversed, the seasons collapsed, because Shiva's grief was not merely a personal emotion. He was a cosmic force, and he was in uncontrolled pain, and there was nothing in the universe capable of containing it. Vishnu followed him. Carefully, gently, invisibly, he began to use his Sudarshana chakra to cut Sati's body into pieces. 51 pieces, and wherever a piece fell, a finger, an eye, a heart, the earth around it became sacred. 51 locations scattered across the subcontinent of India. Still today, these are the Shakti Pithas, pilgrim shrines that trace the outline of a goddess across the map. Millions of devotees travel between them, following the path of a broken love across an entire landscape. And Shiva, his arms finally empty, his grief finally having no object to hold, retreated to Kailash, alone, in silence, in a meditation that froze the world, until Parvati came. After the death of his first wife, Sati, who had thrown herself into a sacrificial fire to defend his honor, Shiva had retreated into meditation so deep that the world itself had begun to freeze. Crops would fail. Rivers would stop flowing. Without Shiva's warmth, his engagement with creation, the universe was slowly dying. The gods needed Shiva to love again, and they needed him to love Parvati. But how do you make the most powerful god in existence open his eyes? They would try everything. They would send Kamadeva, the god of love, the Hindu equivalent of Cupid, to shoot Shiva with a flower arrow while Parvati danced before him. The arrow would strike, Shiva's eyes would snap open, but instead of desire, Shiva would feel rage. He would turn his third eye toward Kamadeva, and the god of love would be reduced to ash in an instant. Burned to nothing by a single glance, love itself destroyed by the god of destruction, the irony was not lost on anyone, but Parvati would not give up. If she could not win Shiva through beauty, she would win him through devotion. She would leave her father's palace, shed her silks and jewels, and sit in the snow of the Himalayas in meditation. For years, her body would waste away, her skin would crack from cold, but she would not move. And slowly, across centuries of silence, Shiva would notice, not her beauty, which he had already rejected, but her will, her refusal to break, her absolute, unshakable commitment to him. He would appear before her disguised as an old Brahmin and try to discourage her. "Shiva is a madman," the Brahmin would say. "He lives in cremation grounds. He wears animal skins. He smears himself with ash. Why would you want such a husband?" And Parvati, without flinching, would answer, "Because I see what you cannot. Behind the ash is the infinite. Behind the destruction is creation. He is everything, and I am his." The disguise would fall away. Shiva would stand before her, eyes soft for the first time in millennia, and he would take her hand. Their wedding would be the most spectacular event in cosmic history. Every god, every sage, every celestial being would attend. Shiva would arrive on his bull, Nandi, his hair matted, his body covered in ash, his groom's party consisting of ghosts, goblins, and the spirits of the dead. Parvati's family, the elegant mountain royalty, would faint at the sight. But Parvati would laugh. She loved him exactly as he was. Together, they would live on Mount Kailash, a domestic life of divine proportions. Shiva would meditate. Parvati would try to get his attention. They would argue. They would reconcile. They would play dice. And Shiva, the master of the universe, would lose every game because Parvati was cleverer. And then, Ganesha. One day, while Shiva was away on one of his long meditations, Parvati would feel lonely. She wanted a companion, someone who was entirely hers. And so, from the turmeric paste on her own body, she would create a boy. She would breathe life into him, kiss his forehead, and name him Ganesha. "Guard this door," she would tell him. "Let no one enter while I bathe." Ganesha, young, earnest, devoted to his mother, would stand at the door like a soldier. And when a wild-looking stranger smeared in ash tried to walk past him, Ganesha would block his path. No one enters. The stranger was Shiva. He had been away so long that he did not know his wife had created a son. And this boy, this nobody, was daring to block his way into his own home. "Move aside," Shiva would command. Ganesha would not move. Shiva's rage, the rage that had burned the god of love, would ignite. His armies would attack the boy. Ganesha would fight them all off. He was Parvati's creation, imbued with her power, and he would not yield. And so Shiva himself would draw his weapon. And with a single strike, he would cut off Ganesha's head. Parvati would emerge to find her son's headless body on the ground and blood on her husband's hands. Her scream would shake the universe, mountains would crumble, oceans would boil. The power of Parvati's grief, she who was, in her ultimate form, Shakti, the primordial feminine energy that powered all of creation, would threaten to unmake reality itself. "Bring him back," she would say, and her voice would be the voice of a force that even Shiva could not defy. "Bring him back, or I will destroy everything." Shiva, stricken with guilt, would send his followers to find a new head. The head of the first creature they encountered sleeping with its head pointing north. They would find an elephant, and so Ganesha, the boy who had only wanted to protect his mother, would be reborn with the head of an elephant. Shiva would declare him his own son. He would give him the title Ganapati, Lord of all beings. He would decree that before any prayer, before any journey, before any new beginning, Ganesha must be worshipped first. And still today, in every corner of India and across the world, the elephant-headed god would be the first deity invoked. Before a wedding, before an exam, before a business deal, before a journey, Ganesha first. Always. He was just a boy. And he was only trying to protect his mother, but Ganesha would not be Shiva and Parvati's only son. There was Kartikeya, also called Murugan, the god of war. His origin was as strange as his brothers. When a demon named Tarakasura threatened to destroy the universe, the gods learned that only a son of Shiva could defeat him. But Shiva was deep in meditation, and no one could disturb him, except, as we have seen, Parvati. The son born of their union, Kartikeya, would be raised by 6 celestial mothers, the Kritikas, which is why he would sometimes be depicted with 6 heads and 12 arms. He would ride a peacock into battle, wielding a spear called Vel that blazed with the concentrated power of all the gods combined. Kartikeya would face Tarakasura's army alone. The demon's forces would number in the millions, ranks of asuras stretching to the horizon, their war drums shaking the earth. But Kartikeya, young and radiant and absolutely without fear, would charge. His spear would cut through demon ranks like a beam of light through shadow. And when he reached Tarakasura himself, the demon who had terrorized heaven for millennia, a single throw of the Vel would pierce the demon's chest and end his reign. The south of India would worship Kartikeya above almost all other gods. In Tamil Nadu, he would be Murugan, the eternally young, the beautiful warrior, the god who proved that even the youngest and most underestimated could defeat the greatest evil. But perhaps the most important story in Shiva's family was not about Shiva at all. It was about Parvati, or rather about who Parvati truly was beneath her gentle exterior. Because Parvati was not simply a goddess, she was Shakti, the primordial feminine energy that powered the entire universe. Without Shakti, the gods were powerless. Without Shakti, Shiva himself was Shava, a lifeless corpse. This was not metaphor. The Shakta tradition would teach that the masculine divine, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, were static, formless, inert, without the feminine energy that animated them. And when that feminine energy was provoked, when Shakti was angered, she would take forms that made even the gods tremble. Durga, the invincible warrior goddess riding a lion, wielding weapons given to her by every god in the pantheon. She had been created when a buffalo demon named Mahishasura had conquered heaven, a demon who had received a boon that no man or god could kill him. He had not thought to include goddesses in his boon. And so Durga, who was not a man, not a god, but the concentrated rage of the feminine divine, would ride into battle against him and impale him on her trident. And when Durga's rage went further, when it reached beyond anger into something primordial, something that existed before creation itself, she would become Kali. Kali, black as the void between stars, her tongue dripping with the blood of demons, a garland of severed heads around her neck, a skirt of severed arms around her waist. She was time. She was death. She was the darkness that existed before the first light and would remain after the last star burned out. In one famous story, Kali would become so lost in the ecstasy of killing demons that she could not stop. Her dance of destruction would threaten to unmake the world. The gods, terrified, would beg Shiva to intervene, and Shiva, the destroyer himself, would lie down in her path. Kali would step on him, and the shock of stepping on her own husband would snap her out of her trance. She would look down, see Shiva beneath her foot, and stop. Her tongue would dart out in surprise, the iconic image that would be worshipped for millennia. This was Hinduism's deepest teaching about power. The feminine was not a complement to the masculine. It was the source. Shakti was not Shiva's helper. She was his power. Without her, he was nothing. And with her, even destruction was an act of love. But of all the images that Shiva's mythology would produce, none would travel further or last longer than a single bronze statue, Nataraja, Lord of the Dance. The sculpture would depict Shiva mid-step, one leg raised, the other planted on the back of a small demon. 4 arms extended, each holding something significant, a drum in one hand, the sound of creation, a flame in another, the fire of destruction. A third hand raised in the gesture of protection, a fourth pointing downward toward his raised foot, the gesture of liberation, as if to say, "Step here and be free." Around him, a ring of fire, the cosmos itself blazing in a perfect circle as Shiva dances in its center. This was the Ananda Tandava, the dance of bliss. The dance that created and destroyed the universe simultaneously, the dance that expressed, in a single frozen gesture, the entire philosophy of Hinduism, that creation and destruction were not opposites, that every moment of existence was both a birth and a death, that the universe itself was not a thing, but a rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat of expansion and contraction, of appearance and disappearance. The demon beneath Shiva's foot, Apasmara, the demon of ignorance and forgetfulness, would be pinned but not destroyed. Because ignorance could never be completely destroyed, only suppressed, held down by the weight of the dancing god for as long as the dance continued. And the dance would never stop. Physicists at CERN, the laboratory in Switzerland that houses the world's largest particle accelerator, would place a statue of Nataraja in their courtyard because they recognized something in it. The swirling ring of fire resembled in an unsettling way the patterns they saw in particle collisions. The constant creation and annihilation of subatomic particles, the dance of energy that underlay all matter. An ancient Hindu sculptor working in bronze 2,000 years ago had captured something that modern physics would only begin to articulate in the 20th century. That at the deepest level of reality, nothing is solid, nothing is still, everything is dancing. Every mythology must answer the question that no one wants to ask: what happens when we die? The Hindu answer was unlike anything the Western world had conceived. There was no single heaven, no permanent hell, no final judgment where a soul was stamped and filed for eternity. Instead, there was a wheel. Samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Every soul, from the lowest insect to the highest god, was trapped on this wheel, spinning through lifetimes without number. You had been born before, as a king, as a beggar, as a bird, as a tree. And you would be born again, and again, and again, until you found a way off. The force that kept the wheel turning was karma. Not karma as the modern world understood it. Not a cosmic system of instant punishment where cutting someone off in traffic would result in a flat tire. Hindu karma was vaster, slower, and more terrifying than that. Every action you had ever taken, every word, every thought, every moment of kindness or cruelty would leave an imprint on your soul. These imprints would accumulate across lifetimes, creating a balance sheet so complex that no human mind could comprehend it. And when you died, this balance would determine your next birth. A life of dharma, of righteous action, of duty fulfilled, would lift you higher on the wheel. A life of adharma, of selfishness, cruelty, and neglect of duty, would drag you lower. You might be born as a prince. You might be born as a worm. The choice was not random. It was the sum total of everything you had ever done. But here was the part that made Hindu philosophy unique. Even a good rebirth was still a rebirth. Even being born as a king or a god was still being trapped on the wheel. The goal was not to reach the top of the cycle, it was to escape the cycle entirely. Moksha, liberation. The final release. the moment when a soul would shed its accumulated karma, realize its true nature as one with Brahman, the ultimate formless reality that underlay everything, and dissolve into the infinite. No more birth, no more death, no more suffering. The Hindus would map out 4 paths to moksha, 4 roads that led to the same destination, each suited to a different kind of soul. Karma Yoga, the path of selfless action. Do your duty, do it perfectly, but surrender the results. This was Krishna's teaching to Arjuna: act without attachment, and the chains of karma would fall away. Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. Love God so completely that the ego dissolves. This was Hanuman's path, love so pure that the boundary between self and divine disappeared entirely. The Bhaktas, the devotees, would sing, dance, weep, and lose themselves in divine love until nothing remained but the beloved. Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. Study, contemplate, ask the deepest questions. Who am I? What is real? What remains when everything impermanent is stripped away? Through relentless inquiry, the seeker would eventually realize that the individual soul, the Atman, was identical to Brahman, the universal soul. Tat Tvam Asi, the Upanishads would declare, "Thou art that." You are not separate from God. You are God. You have always been God. You simply forgot. And Raja Yoga, the royal path of meditation. Still the mind. Control the breath. Withdraw the senses from the outside world and turn them inward. Through years, sometimes lifetimes, of disciplined practice, the yogi would quiet every thought until consciousness itself became transparent, and the truth behind reality would shine through like sunlight through clean glass. The word yoga, which billions of people around the world now associate with stretching exercises on rubber mats, originally meant union. Union of the individual soul with the infinite. Union of the seeker with the sought. The drop with the ocean. The small self with the vast self it had forgotten it already was. The physical postures were merely preparation, warming up the body so it could sit in meditation for hours without pain. The real yoga was internal, invisible, a journey that happened entirely within. But moksha was not easy. It might take millions of lifetimes to achieve, and along the way there would be detours through realms of suffering that would make any Western hell look quaint. Naraka, the Hindu underworld, was not one place but many. 28 hells, each designed for a specific sin with a precision that was almost bureaucratic. Tamisra, the realm of darkness, for those who had stolen others' wealth or others' spouses. Here the soul would be beaten with clubs by the servants of Yama, the god of death, until the stolen karma was paid back in full. Raurava, for those who had caused suffering to others. Here, the creatures the sinner had tormented in life would return in monstrous form, rurous serpents with fangs dripping fire, and pursue the soul across an endless burning plain. Kumbhipaka, for those who had cooked animals alive. Here, the sinner would be boiled in oil, cooked in the same way they had cooked other beings. The symmetry was the point. Hindu hell was not random punishment, it was a mirror. Maharaurava, for those who had enriched themselves at the expense of others. Asipatravana, a forest where the leaves of every tree were razor-sharp swords, and the sinner would be forced to run through it, sliced with every step. Shalmali, for those who had committed adultery, where a tree of iron thorns would embrace the sinner and hold them for centuries. But, and this was crucial, even these hells were temporary. No soul was condemned forever. There was no eternal damnation in Hinduism. After the punishment was served, after the karma was burned away, the soul would be released back onto the wheel. another birth, another chance, another opportunity to get it right. This was perhaps the most radical idea in all of Hindu philosophy: absolute, unconditional hope. No matter how far you had fallen, no matter how many lifetimes of cruelty and ignorance you had accumulated, the wheel would eventually carry you upward. Redemption was not a possibility. It was a mathematical certainty. The only variable was time, and eternity was infinitely patient. But the journey through samsara, the cycle of rebirth, was not merely a moral accounting system. It was also a journey of the soul toward understanding. Each lifetime would teach something. Each birth, whether as a king or a worm, a saint or a murderer, would add a thread to the tapestry of the soul's experience. And over millions of lifetimes, that tapestry would become complete enough for the soul to see the pattern, to recognize itself, to remember what it had always been. The god Yama, the lord of death, the judge of the dead, would preside over this process. He was not evil. He was not a punisher. He was an administrator, fair, impartial, and utterly incorruptible. When a soul arrived before his throne, Yama's scribe, Chitragupta, would open the book of deeds, a record of every action, every thought, every intention across every lifetime. Nothing was hidden, nothing was forgotten, and based on this record, the soul would be sent to its next destination: heaven, hell, or back to earth. But the judgment of Yama was not the first thing a dying soul would encounter. The Garuda Purana, the ancient Hindu text devoted entirely to the science of death, would describe the soul's journey with extraordinary precision. Not vaguely, not metaphorically, with the kind of detail that suggested someone had been there and returned to report. In the moment of death, the soul would leave the physical body with tremendous difficulty, like a fish being pulled from water against its will. The subtle body, an invisible double of the gross physical form, the seat of consciousness throughout life, would separate and find itself suddenly, disoriently free of flesh. Two kinds of messengers would arrive. If the dying person had lived with dharma, with kindness, with duty, with a genuine effort toward righteousness, the Vishnu Dutas would come. Divine messengers clothed in white, calm and radiant, speaking gently. They would take the soul northward, toward realms of light. The journey would be luminous. If the soul carried heavy karma from cruelty and sustained selfishness, Yama's messengers would come instead, the Yama Dutas, dark and terrifying, armed with nooses made from no rope that any craftsman could fashion. The soul would be bound and carried southward toward judgment. Either way, the journey would take time, and during that time, the soul would still feel the pull of its former life. It would linger near its body, watch its own funeral, see the grief of the people it had loved, feel, painfully, the attachment it had accumulated across a lifetime. This was why the living performed specific rites for the dead, offering rice, water, sesame seeds, prayer, because the departing soul could still receive these gifts in its vulnerable, in-between state, could be fed and comforted for the 13 days before it was fully released. The bond between living and dead was not severed immediately at death. It frayed slowly, like a rope coming apart thread by thread over those 13 days. At the end of the journey stood Yama's court, a realm of iron walls and twilight air suspended between the world of the living and whatever came next. And there, before Yama's throne, sat Chitragupta, perhaps the most remarkable figure in all of Hindu cosmology, a cosmic accountant, a divine bureaucrat, the keeper of the one ledger that was never wrong. His book of deeds, the Agrasandani, contained every action a soul had ever taken across all its lifetimes, not just the actions, the motivations behind them, not just the words spoken, the thoughts that had existed before the words, not just the deeds committed, the emotions and intentions and hesitations that had shaped every choice. The soul could not lie before Chitragupta. Not because lying was forbidden, but because the record was not external. It was the soul itself. Everything the soul had ever done had been encoded in the fabric of its being. Chitragupta did not read from a book. He read from the soul, and the soul could not pretend to be other than what it was. When the reading was complete, Yama would pronounce the judgment, and the soul would go where it needed to go, not as reward or punishment in the simple Western sense, but as the next necessary experience in a journey that would continue across lifetimes until liberation was achieved. The brilliance of this system was not its severity, it was its fairness. Every soul received exactly what it had earned. Nothing more, nothing less. The cosmic balance could not be bribed by wealth, could not be charmed by beauty, could not be impressed by social status or political power. In death, all that remained was what you had actually done with the life you had been given. Chitragupta, the one who wrote it all down, the accountant of eternity. But Yama was also, secretly, the first being who had ever died. In the ancient texts, Yama was a mortal man, the very first mortal, who had walked the path of death so that all future souls would have a road to follow. He did not rule the dead because he was cruel. He ruled them because he was the first, the pioneer, the one who had walked the dark path and lit it for those who would come after. And yet, the wheel itself would not turn forever, because the Hindus had calculated with mathematical precision when the universe would end. Time, in Hindu cosmology, moved in cycles within cycles. The smallest cycle was the Yuga, an age. There were 4 Yugas, each shorter and more corrupt than the last. The Satya Yuga, the Golden Age, would last 728,000 years. In it, Dharma would stand on 4 legs. Humans would live for 100,000 years. Truth would be effortless. Evil would be almost unknown. The Treta Yuga, the Silver Age, would last 1,296,000 years. Dharma would stand on 3 legs. This was the age of Rama, still noble, but shadows were creeping in. The Dvapara Yuga, the Bronze Age, would last 864,000 years. Dharma on 2 legs. This was the age of Krishna and the Mahabharata, a world where right and wrong had become tangled beyond easy separation. And then the Kali Yuga, the Dark Age, Dharma on 1 leg, lasting 432,000 years. In the Kali Yuga, rulers would be tyrants, priests would sell their prayers, marriages would be empty, friendship would be a transaction, truth would be punished, and lies rewarded. The natural world would decay, rivers would run dry, animals would shrink. Human life would shrink to a mere handful of decades. According to the Hindu calendar, the Kali Yuga began on February 17, 3102 BCE, the day Krishna left the earth after the Mahabharata war, approximately 5,000 years ago. We are in it now. And if the description of the Kali Yuga sounds familiar, if it sounds like a description of the world you see when you look out your window, that is not a coincidence. The ancient sages who wrote these texts were not predicting the future. They were describing a pattern they had seen before. Because the Kali Yuga has happened countless times, and it will happen countless more. This is the Dark Age, the bottom of the wheel, the lowest point of the cycle. But the wheel turns, it always turns, and the Kali Yuga would not last forever. because at the end of the Dark Age, when humanity had fallen as far as it could fall, when the world was drowning in its own corruption, Vishnu would descend one final time. Kalki, the 10th avatar, the one who had not yet come. He would arrive on a white horse, wielding a flaming sword, blazing like a comet across the darkened sky. He would not come to teach, or to trick, or to love. He would come to end. Kalki would destroy the wicked. He would cleanse the earth with fire. He would close the Kali Yuga and, with it, the Maha Yuga, the great cycle of 4 ages. And then, silence. The universe would contract. The stars would go dark. The oceans would evaporate. Time itself would slow, stutter, and stop. Brahma would close his eyes. And on the cosmic ocean, resting on the coils of the endless serpent, Vishnu would sleep once more. But not forever. Because after the rest, after the silence, Vishnu's navel would stir, a golden lotus would grow, and inside it, a new Brahma would open 4 confused eyes and see nothing but darkness. And the story would begin again. This is what Hindu mythology gave the world, not a story with a beginning and an end, but a wheel. Turning, always turning. Creation and destruction locked in an eternal dance. Gods who love and fight and fail and try again. Humans who carry the weight of 1,000,000 past lives and the hope of 1,000,000 more. Think about what traveled outward from these stories. The word avatar, which billions of people use daily without knowing that it means a god choosing to descend. The concept of karma, which has seeped into every language on earth, a reminder that actions have consequences that ripple across lifetimes. The number 0, which Indian mathematicians gave to the world, born from a civilization that understood nothingness not as an absence, but as a divine principle. Without 0, there would be no modern mathematics, no computers, no digital world. A concept that began in Hindu philosophy would become the foundation of everything we call technology. Yoga, which 300 million people now practice worldwide, most of them unaware that the stretches they do on rubber mats were originally preparation for a journey inward, toward the dissolution of the self into the infinite. The Bhagavad Gita, which Robert Oppenheimer would quote when he watched the first atomic bomb explode in the New Mexico desert, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Krishna's words to Arjuna, spoken on a battlefield 5,000 years ago, finding their terrible echo in the birth of the nuclear age. Meditation, which Silicon Valley executives and Navy SEALs and school children and hospital patients and professional athletes now practice daily in every country on Earth, tracing a direct line back to the sages who sat in the Himalayas thousands of years ago and discovered that the most powerful thing a human being could do was learn to be still. And reincarnation, the idea that death is not an end, but a doorway, that the soul is infinite and ancient and has worn more faces than any one lifetime could hold. That every person you meet might be someone you have loved or fought or been in another life, in another century, under another sky. An idea that over 1 billion people on Earth still believe right now as you hear these words. These were not primitive superstitions from a forgotten age. These were ideas so powerful, so deeply true, that they would survive for 5,000 years and spread to every corner of the globe. They would outlast empires, survive colonization, weather the age of reason, and emerge into the modern world not as relics, but as living, breathing, evolving traditions. And at the center of it all, beneath all the stories, all the gods, all the wars and loves and cosmic cycles and rebirths, a single image. A god sleeping on a cosmic ocean. The great serpent coiled beneath him, the golden lotus growing from his navel. And inside the lotus, a new creator opening 4 eyes for the first time, seeing nothing but darkness, and preparing to build a universe. When Vishnu wakes from his dream, this universe ends. Every star goes dark, every ocean dries, every soul returns to the infinite ocean of consciousness from which it came. But the sleep does not last. The lotus grows again. The eyes open again. The word Om rings out again. And a new universe, with new gods, new heroes, new wars, new loves, explodes into existence. Brahma sleeps, and we, all of us, right now, exist inside one of his dreams. The oldest religion on earth, the longest story ever told, and it has no ending, only the next beginning. Because in Hindu mythology, nothing ever truly ends. It just begins again. Silence. 5 seconds. Then fade to black. End of script. Total estimated length, 150 WPM.